It's feminist then there. But we made a point out of it. I am moving out and in the end. Yes, yes, I know. Do this. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Welcome everyone. My name is Kurt Langfeld. I'm the Dean of School Computer Data and Mathematical Sciences. I'm not a mathematician myself, but for my sins, I was head of School of Mathematics in Leeds for 5 years. So I have a strong connection to mathematics, and it's great that we have this event here. And thank you all for coming to celebrate the Women in Mathematics Day. It falls on the birthday of Maryam, who unfortunately has died prematurely. She was the first woman who actually has received the Fields Medal. And that is what we want to celebrate here. And we have fantastic speakers lining up. But before that, a bit of housekeeping. Just if toilets are out there, just around the corridor over there. And if there is a fire alarm, which I don't hope, we orderly vacate, and the nearest exit is just around the corner. So that will be easy. And as it's tradition here at the university, I would like to start with acknowledging country. So I acknowledge the country, the traditional owners of the land, which is for Parramatta South, the Parramatta Gal people of the Darug Nation, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present. So having that, I just would like to hand over to a good colleague, Leanne, who has been just recently head of department for STEM education, CTMSE, as we call it. And she will introduce a little bit more the proceedings of the day. So welcome from my side.
Thank you, Scott. Well, I've been asked to say a little bit about maths and maths degree here at Western Sydney. So I'll start with that. So a little bit about us before we hear from our three amazing speakers. So I'll start talking about just maths and the maths staff, because it's the maths staff who created and who look after the Bachelor of Mathematics here. In research, the maths staff here have done, I think, particularly well. It's a small group. We're not like some of the universities that have 2,500 students in first year. We actually have much smaller groups. And so because we teach far fewer students, we're actually quite a smaller group than a lot of other universities. However, we punch well beyond our weight. For example, in the ERA assessments, which ran for some time, we were always rated at or above world standard. And in fact, in the last one, which was about 2018, we scored 4 in mathematics, pure mathematics, applied mathematics, and statistics in 4 categories. To score 4, which is above world standard when the highest is 5, and we're a small department, is, I think, really impressive. So in research, we've done well. We have also had 2 staff with ARC Future Fellowships. We have a highly cited Clarivate highly cited researcher. There aren't many of those around. That's pretty special. And we've also had, and perhaps part of the reason we've been so good is we've had our research supported since 2008 with the Centre for Research in Mathematics and Data Science, though it's gone through various different names over that time. So within that centre, all pure math staff in that centre as of last year had been a chief investigator on at least one ARC discovery project. So if you look at the record of the research, it's a good group. We've got a good basis for the future and for a good degree. On the teaching side, we've got some staff, well, all staff are highly committed to teaching and we want to do well, but we've got a group of staff who put in an amazing amount of effort. Teaching is their focus. They really, really care and put in well beyond the time they should to ensure quality, that students are looked after, integrity, everything there. There's some staff have won teaching awards. Quite a few staff are involved in scholarship of tertiary mathematics and statistics teaching and learning. So we know what's going on with the sector, we keep in touch. And because we don't have classes of 2,500 in first year or things like that. They're much, much, much smaller. Studying at Western Sydney is much more personal. You get to know the staff much better and the staff get to know the students much more. So all of this, the staff, is a really good background for a degree. So the Bachelor of Mathematics was established in 2020 with first intake in 2022. So it's reasonably new. It's a standalone maths degree, which we hadn't had for a long, long time. It's much better than, say, a mathematics flavored science degree or something like that. It's a really solid degree. And last year, late last year, or was it officially early this year, it got accreditation from the Australian Mathematical Society, the first in Australia to do so. So I'm very pleased about that, and I'm also very pleased about the accreditation process. I think that's important for mathematics. Now, the Bachelor of Mathematics has 16 core subjects, 15 are Maths and Stats, and 1 programming. So that gives students a really solid background in Maths and Stats, and programming is necessary these days for if you're going to do some maths. So it's a really good, solid background. On top of that, students, well, they've still got 8 subjects to choose, but they can, if they want, do a major in data science and graduate with Bachelor of Mathematics Data Science, or they can do a major in computational mathematics or secondary teaching, or of course they can use the space in their degree to go in a totally different area. As we know, mathematics is useful absolutely everywhere, so students can study other areas if they want. But I'm particularly pleased, well, when I see students who come into secondary teaching, because there is a huge need for secondary teachers. I believe that jobs there are really easy to get, and only a day or 2 ago, I read that the popularity of teaching is increasing because it is seen as being AI proof. And in schools, we do need people in with kids, so that sounds reasonable to me. The Bachelor of Mathematics is growing. As I said, it's a new degree, but it's growing. It has attracted some high ATAR students, and some of our graduates have gone on to study with some really excellent mathematicians elsewhere. So that's a little bit about mathematics and the degree. I think the mathematics is a great group, and we have a really, really strong degree. But we're not here to hear from me or about that this afternoon. We have 3 amazing speakers arranged by Roozbeh, who has done all the work to get this going. Now, our first speaker is, that looks like, that's her photo, isn't it? It's hard for me to see that there, but I think it's, I think that is Alfigen Sabandel. There. Hello. Alfigen Sabandel is a friend of Western Sydney. She visited here a couple of years ago. She was here for a year. And she describes herself on her website as an algebra enthusiast, which I think is absolutely amazing. How can you do better than that? She has done a lot of work on Levitt path algebras, which is a topic of interest to some people here. Alfigen did her PhD in mathematics in Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology in the Philippines, under the supervision of Jocelyn Villela, and also supervision of Roozbeh. Alfigen, I'll turn it over to you. One thing I should say is Alfigen is she's a young mathematician early in her career, and our later speakers are a little further on in her career. So here we get the chance to hear from someone who is early in her career. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor. Can you hear me clearly?
Maybe you want to speak a little bit louder because it's the speaker of the mic computer. Hopefully it works.
How about now? Is this better?
It's good.
Okay. Okay, allow me to share my screen. I hope you can see that.
Yeah, all good.
I think so. Okay. Again, thank you so much for this lovely invitation to Professor Roozbeh Hazrat for inviting me to be invited in such a prestigious event, Women in Maths. It's something that I'm very, very proud of myself. I'm very honored, as what Professor have said. I'm a young researcher mathematician. So to have this opportunity is very important for me, and to have everyone listen to my talk is such an amazing feeling. So thank you so much. Um, so as mentioned, I am Alfiljan Sibandel. You can call me Alfie, and I'm from the Philippines. And my talk is gonna be about my journey in maths as a young mathematician. I just recently turned 30, so I think I'm still considered young, I hope. And yeah, I'll perhaps a little of maths of what we did, but mostly of my journey. So this is our lovely photo with Professor Roozbeh Hazrat, my external supervisor, and Professor Jocelyn Villela from my local university in the Philippines. So this was taken in 2024, the first time that Roozbeh visited Philippines, and I was very, very happy to have him there. And I spent a year in WSU, funded by the Department of Science and Technology in 2022 to 2023. And I am very happy that Rizvi was very nice to share his office to me during the time that he was away. And at the time, it was something that I did not know was possible for a professor to share his office to you. So I was very honored, and yeah, I feel honored by that. Thank you, Rizvi, about that. And mathematically, what we worked, this is going to be very brief. We worked on directed graphs, vertices, and arrows. We also call them edges in our language, and two algebraic entities that you can take out from this directed graph. The first one is an algebra. It's called Levitt path algebra. It was given birth in 2025, 2005, 2006, 2007. And the second one is the so-called talented monoid, which Roozbeh Hazrat, together with Professor Wan Lee in 2020, named. And our work relies on how can we connect these two algebraic entities? Is there a connection between them, since we are both extracting them using a directed graph?
Oh, seems frozen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Roozbeh has coined. In 2025, we have confirmed the conjecture in the case of in a partial case. So up until this point, it's still an open problem. It's also coming out in operator algebras in symbolic dynamics. So this conjecture not only lies in algebra but all other sciences or maths. That means that it's very nice for interdisciplinary works. Okay, that's it. That's the entire thing about maths. And now my journey. So I have given this talk multiple times now, and it's called Why Engage, because before I did not know what's the beauty or why we need to engage in circumstances, in events, in conferences, and in my how many years now, maybe 7 years of experience, very small experience. This is what I've learned. We engage. Hopefully, we will learn why it's important to engage and learn from people, why active participation is important, and lastly, why having guts and taking risks are important. As someone, a Filipina, a young Filipina, this is something that I did not know before, or I was very in a closed mindset before that I just do maths, that's it. But thankfully, I was very blessed that I had various experiences that led me to knowing these principles. And I'm gonna take you in a not very long ride of the past 7 years of my life since 2019. It all started also in Sydney, actually, in 2019 in the Asia Australia Algebra Conference, which was organized by Professor Roozbeh at WSU. And this is me. I don't
This connection here is okay. It's from the other side.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I think I got this.
Yes, you're back.
I think she's lost again, right?
Yes.
Her connection is not good.
It might help some bandwidth if she sends us a presentation of sharing the screen, but I'm not sure this takes too much time.
Okay, so sorry about that. The internet is not very good in my location. Um, okay, you can see the, okay, I can see it on the side. Okay. Yes, I've mentioned this was a very new experience for me. It was the first international mathematics experience for me, and I was intimidated. I was very scared at this time, but also happy because it's Sydney. It was the first international travel I ever had in my entire life. And during this time, there was a prize that was given to the student presenter who was the best in presenting. It's called the Gordon Preston Prize. And upon knowing this, I'm a bit competitive. I really tried my best to win this award. Um, at that time, I thought that what it took was the best PowerPoint presentation. So I really tried my best to have the nicest, presentation visually. Unfortunately, I did not win. And the winner at the time was Lauren Thornton. She was the Gordon Preston Prize winner. This is 2019. Uh, Um, I was very sad, but of course she deserves it. I saw her presentation, no questions, but I was very sad because I really tried my best. I was sad, but also very happy because I was able to share my experience with the students
Hopefully the other two presentations are live happening here. There we go.
I'm terribly sorry.
Perhaps turn off your video.
Yeah. I can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm.
All right. Okay. I hope it will survive. Okay. So as I've mentioned, um, this experience led me to having a Facebook profile picture for 4 years. For this is 2019, and so I was very happy at the end. It is something that is not everyone in the Philippines can have. So, but since 2022, so it was 2019 to 2022, thankfully in 2022, I got to have a new profile picture this time in Heidelberg, Germany. This was because I was given the chance to have a research visit with Professor Wolfgang Bock at Technische University in Germany, Kaiserslautern in Germany. And this was the first time I have experienced a research visit in my entire life, and I did not know how it works. But I was very thankful that the entire trip was funded by Professor Wolfgang. So that was also very new to me. And he told me that, okay, so this is the map of the world. I hope this is correct. So this is the Philippines on the right and Germany there in the middle. And there was a Simpa school in Brazil at the time that I was visiting Germany. So Wolfgang told me that what if I can do this routing from Philippines to Germany and then Germany to Brazil and then Brazil to Philippines. it looks very nice. You have the chance to go to Brazil, but I had no money. I was a broke PhD student with no money. The only reason why I was able to go to Germany was because of Professor Wolfgang. So I was like, okay, there's no chance that I can do this. Then Wolfgang said, you should ask if you could give a talk. He said that I should email the organizers of the Simpa School in Brazil and ask, hey, I am Alpha Gen Sibandal, a PhD student. Is very new to me because that asks
Did we turn off our camera?
I think there is a delay. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, you can see. So because in my camera I cannot see. Okay. So if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Please interrupt me if I'm now again disconnected. And so it is true. I cannot do anything about it. So I abided with Wolfgang's command to me as my mentor. So thankfully, in 2022, they said yes. In the Simpa School in Brazil said yes, and this was the very first ever invited event for me. Even though if I was not invited technically. I invited myself, but in the papers at least it's called an invited speaker. And the good thing about this is it goes with funding, and so without the question, without asking them if I can go, definitely I will have no chance to go because I have no money, and the funding really helped me. So what are the outcomes of SIMPA, of the event in Brazil for me? First, Professor Mikola Kripchenko, after the SIMPA school in Brazil, he emailed me and he told me, Dear Alphagen, we would like to organize a SIMPA school in the Philippines in 2024. Are you interested in being the local coordinator in the school? And indeed, in 2024, we held the first or the SIMPA school in the Philippines because of Professor Mikola Kripchenko's email, who I met in Brazil. And if you can take Samuel Lopes from University of Porto. He's one of the
She's not here.
She's,
She's still here.
no.
Maybe I should also. Alfie, you're back.
University. Now, I found
Where
that
is this?
must be your homepage. It says you have an interest in the topology, geometry, and combinatory spaces and categories that arise from representation theory. It also says an awful lot more, but I'll stick with that for the moment. And also, Asalava
Supposed
for
to
me
be
has been
crystallized,
annoying
isn't
me since January because she created this absolutely wonderful puzzle, which I have a copy of here, which is was
I don't know.
thought
how
to
to
be
use
a
it.
really
Yeah.
good puzzle pastel.
Maybe I just ask her to just go, oops.
So, thank you, Asalava.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you very much for the invitation. This is really lovely. Real pleasure to be here. And thank you for coming.
Oh,
Let me just
You need
grab
to
the.
maximize it. Like a
I know.
what can I do?
That's okay. Have a, yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Awesome, thank you. Right, thanks for being here. Now that there's a remote. So actually, I was just introduced, but a little bit about myself. I'm a senior lecturer in mathematics at the Australian National University. I'm a pure mathematician. And I'm a DECRA fellow, which means at the moment I'm doing more or less more focusing on research. And I'm a Tuckwell fellow, which means at the moment my part-time position is to mentor a select group of undergraduates at the university, not just in mathematics, but from all different fields. And so I do that 20% of the time, and the other time I'm researching and I'm also teaching a class. And so I was asked to say a little bit about my journey to mathematics and some challenges that I've faced and some of the things that I do. So it's awfully a lot of topics in 35 minutes, but I'll try to do my best. So I'll give a little bit of a biography. So I grew up in India up until I did my high school, and then I was very lucky to get a scholarship to study in the US. So I did my university studies there, and because of the oddities of the degree, I got a mathematics with computer science degree rather than a mathematics and computer science degree. And this is all because I didn't want to study electrical engineering. So that's my little secret. Anyway, so, but I was always very much into mathematics, and I really also like computing. And then I did a PhD. I don't know how to move this down. So my PhD is in geometric representation theory, but I still have trouble describing what I actually do because I tend to move around quite a bit.
I'm not sure actually how to.
You have to click on the window again so that you can move on. But
How about now? Can you go?
Excellent. There we go. And then I did a postdoc at the University of Georgia, and I've been at ANU for over 8 years now. And I love living in Australia, so I feel very lucky. There we go. Okay, so I just want to start a little bit with my mathematical interests. So as I said, I'm a pure mathematician, and I have many interests, and they kind of change wildly very quickly. But one thing that I'm really working on ever since I moved to Australia is the braid group. So I usually start my talks with the braid group, so I'll do that here as well, because I really love this picture, and I think it's so visual, and it just tells you what you have to do. So a braid is a continuous motion of n distinct points in the plane, as I've drawn there. It avoids collisions, and it starts in a configuration, and it ends again at the original configuration. The points may move around, so the strands may connect to different points, but in the end, the 4 points that you start with are the 4 points that you end with, and in the middle, the positions change. So I basically study this. But this, of course, as you can imagine, this models movement of points in the plane, but you can do this topologically, as I've drawn here, or you can do it algebraically. So when I want to look at this kind of motion, I always want to think about it up to homotopy, which means that if two such motions differ by a slight wiggling without crossing each other, then I regard them as being the same. And so because of this reason, we can, instead of drawing the 3D pictures there, it's sometimes easier to just draw 2D pictures, and also often to just do algebra with them. So I've labeled the pictures. So the first picture on the top is the first two strands crossing once, and we normally call that a sigma 1. And then the second two strands crossing would be a sigma 2, and the third two strands crossing, or the third and fourth crossing would be a sigma 3, and so on. And then using this, you can also write, you can compose these braids. So if you do that, then if you draw braid diagrams, then braid diagrams actually have products and inverses. So just to let everybody think about this for a minute, if you haven't seen this before. So the top diagram there is a braid diagram for 3 strands, and the bottom diagram is another braid diagram for 3 strands. And if you have a braid diagram for n strands and another braid diagram for n strands, you can stack them on top of each other and just connect and forget the middle points, and you'll get another braid diagram on the same number of strands. And then you can collapse that by wiggling, and so you get something like this. And it's not that hard to see that actually by doing the opposite of what you did, you can invert, in the sense that if you have one on top, you can do the opposite on the bottom, compose them, and get a straight diagram. So there's a product and there's an inverse. And so these diagrams, if you like, form a group, mathematical group. That's the structure that they form. So these are invertible symmetries, in this case of point configurations, under some prescribed rules. And together they form a group. And braid groups and generalized braid groups are extremely important objects in mathematics and physics because they model a whole bunch of different things. And at the moment, that's one of the focuses of the work I do. So I won't go into too much technical detail at the moment, just because it's such a broad talk, but I'll explain some common themes that come up in what I do and what other people do with this kind of mathematics. So the one common theme in representation theory, which is really the field that I come from, is to understand symmetries, for example, braids, but also lots of other symmetries, by realizing them as matrices. So that's the first kind of step. So you want to realize every braid diagram as a matrix, such that when you compose braid diagrams, the matrices multiply and everything is compatible. So that's what you want to do. And this is basically the field of representation theory. You're trying to understand symmetries by making them act on vector spaces. So here's a very simple example. So if you just consider the 3-strand braid group, you get a valid representation by assigning these matrices. So you can't just assign any old matrices, as you might imagine, because the products and the inverses might not really work out. But if you want to, you can check that the multiplication that you get on the 3-strand braid group is the same sort of multiplication that you would get with these matrices. So this is an example. And sometimes, unfortunately, especially when you have a group that's as big as the braid group, it's an infinite group. Because why is it infinite? Because you can, for instance, even if you have 2 strands, you can keep twisting them, and n twists is not the same as n plus 1 twists. So if you have such a big symmetric object, you realizing them as matrices might not always give you enough information. Or like, it might give you enough information, but you might still want other realizations of your group to get even more information. So from that point of view, we also realize them as operations on geometric spaces or categories, which is harder to explain the full details of at the moment, but that's okay. But these are the fields of geometric group theory, geometric representation theory, categorical representation theory, all kinds of things. But here are some examples without going into much detail. So the n-strand braid group is the fundamental group of the space of unordered configurations of endpoints. So if that doesn't mean anything to you, it's simply the diagram that I drew. So if you have a configuration of points, you move them around with respect to each other and come back. So these kinds of symmetries form the fundamental group. And the braid group also acts on many important categories, which again, I don't want to go into. But the upshot of this is that these more refined actions help you recover some of the previous matrix actions that you had. So you get more information. Of course, it's more complicated, but you do get back what you had before. And so it's worth studying, even if it's harder. Okay, and these points of view connect a large number of different mathematical fields, so they can be used to deduce fundamental new results in combinatorics, topology, algebra, geometry, and all kinds of fields. And I mean, there are many, many examples, but I'll just give you one example. There's a particular linear representation of the braid group called the Burau representation. The details are not so important, but it's a representation of the 4-strand braid group. And as of now, it's probably about, it's a 90-year-old problem, 90-plus-year-old problem, and people don't know whether this representation is faithful. What that means is that there's an assignment of, sigma 1 to a matrix, sigma 2 to a matrix, sigma 3 to a matrix, and we don't know if this assignment sends a non-trivial braid to the identity matrix. So that's unknown. It's just the 4-strand braid group, and it's a 90-year-old problem that's unsolved. And the answer to that problem will have implications to the behavior of something called the Jones polynomial, which is an invariant of nonce. So this is really a very topological kind of problem, and it's a problem of whether something called the Jones polynomial can detect the unnot. And if the Borel representation is unfaithful, meaning if it sends a non-trivial braid to the identity, then that would mean that the Jones polynomial does not detect the unnot, which means that there's some knot, which is not the unknot, which has the same trivial Jones polynomial as the unknot, which is just the same. So that's actually quite attractive. Okay, so things like this. So you can connect a whole bunch of different fields using this kind of perspective. Okay, so for now, I'll pause on the mathematics because I was also asked to explain some of the challenges that I've faced. And there have been many challenges, also many opportunities. So I'll just phrase them as lessons that I'm still learning, because I think, yeah, it's also great for me to be able to write this down, because then I can go back and look at them. So lessons I'm still learning, and this will actually tie back in with Alfie's talks. I think some of them will be this. So the first one is to trust yourself and your ideas. So this was actually very difficult. This is a very difficult thing for me to do, because I'm always trying to compare, oh, is this interesting or not? Is this, worth studying or not? Because there are so many problems out there, and like, I don't know, something that interests me may or may not interest anybody else, and most people will tell you that your ideas won't work. It's not because they're trying to be annoying. It's just simply something someone says. I don't think that'll work. But actually, like, they might work, and you'll never know if you don't test them out. So this is something that I've had to teach myself. If I'm just because somebody says, that probably won't work, I shouldn't just abandon that idea. Probably I should test some simple cases, try it, and then think about whether or not it might work. And related to that, and again, related to Alfie's talk, the second lesson that I'm still learning is to share your ideas. This is also something that's very, very difficult for me, because I'm really an introvert, and it took me a long time to be comfortable coming up in front of people and talking in public, and also like just one-on-one discussing mathematics, because it's such a confronting process. It's your stuff, and yeah, it's hard. So, but nevertheless, sharing ideas is what makes them robust, workable, and applicable. And actually, I've learned over the years, and I'm still again learning, that sharing ideas means that people ask you questions, and a lot of the time you don't know how to answer those questions, and that's okay. But that at least tells you, oh, this is a question that I don't know how to answer, and I didn't think of it, so maybe I should work on that. Or like, and the next time someone asks you that question, you're prepared. So this is something that has been a bit of a challenge for me, but also I feel like I've worked on. Lesson number 3 is that every skill improves with practice. So it's never like, oh, I'm not good at this and I'm good at this other thing. It's simply probably haven't had enough practice. And so setting time aside to do exercises is important, no matter your life or career stage. And also to sign up to do things even when you think you're not quite ready. So I have a PhD student at the moment. She's my first PhD student, and she started last year. And I definitely didn't think I was ready to take a PhD student on. And I still don't quite think I'm ready. And so I don't know how that's going to go. But I think she's doing really well. But I was having a conversation with her about this particular thing. I said, look, you can't just, you have to do the basic stuff. You have to do the exercises, because otherwise you won't learn. And so the last, I have no idea what time when I started, and I'm just going to keep. And the last lesson that I have for myself, and just to write down for anyone else who's interested, is that real understanding cannot be outsourced. And this is, I think, extremely important, again, as Leon said, in the age of AI, when, students especially, but also everybody is relying on AI quite a lot. But that's just one side of the story. It's simply, sometimes you just have to go back and do the basic exercises. I mean, you just have to. So even though learning is not linear, because sometimes you have to jump ahead in order to understand what came before. And that, I found this as a challenge actually for me, because I thought, oh, I don't understand this, I cannot move on. But in fact, it's okay to move on. It's just maybe moving on helps you understand the bigger picture, but then you have to move back and do the exercise, the fundamental stuff, and then keep going. So you have to keep going back and forth. And this actually comes back to me every time I teach a class. So I'm teaching a class on Coxeter groups, which is, symmetry groups of certain like crystallographic systems. And I realized there's some basic linear algebra that I had actually forgotten. And I told the students, because I realized I had forgotten it, so I told the students, look, please go back and review the basics of bilinear forms. And turned out that several of my students hadn't done it. And I said, well, did you review the basics of bilinear forms? And my students said, no, I thought I'd be fine. And I also thought I'd be fine. But actually, because I've had some experience, I actually had gone back and done the basic exercise and realized I didn't actually remember many of those things. And so I told my students, look, I did them myself, because I took, I don't know when I took linear algebra. That's what I work on every day, but still, learning is not linear. So that's just what it is. Right, so to truly master something, you can neither skip the fundamentals nor the hard work. Sometimes you have to do it several times. Okay, all of that said, I want to come back to the mathematics a little bit, and I didn't really tell you enough to be able to tell you any theorems, but I thought I'd share some pictures with you. So I just selected some pictures from my work. Some of the papers have some stories attached to them, so I thought I'd share those. And yeah, so is this, okay, this is, so I've written the titles, which may or may not mean anything, and that's okay. So this is a picture from a paper which is joined with Anand Devpurkar and Tony Licata. I say 2020 plus because it's still in the publication pipeline, unfortunately, even though it was put on the archive in 2020. But that's okay, that's just how life is. And this is a picture of the hyperbolic plane, really. And this is a tiling of the hyperbolic plane by hyperbolic triangles. But the perspective is different. And so the perspective in this picture, that is the compactification of the stability manifold for the three-strand braid group. So the stability manifold is a particular manifold topological space attached to a category that the braid group acts on. And so the three-strand braid group has this space. And it turns out that if under a suitable lens, you can regard that space as the interior of the hyperbolic disk. And the hyperbolic disk is styled by, let's say, hyperbolic triangles. And so you can see here, the central triangle is kind of the basic one. And I've written sigma 1 lambda, sigma 2 lambda, and sigma x lambda. So sigma 1 and sigma 2 are really the generators that I wrote down for you several slides ago. And sigma x, which I didn't explain, is actually sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 1 inverse. So it's a third element, which turns out to be important for this particular symmetry. And you can see how when the group acts on this central triangle, you move out towards the edge. And in this paper, we described a compactification of this manifold. And in this picture, it turns out that the compactification is simply just the boundary circle. So it's quite a pleasing picture, which, previously we only had the interior. And we didn't quite know what was happening at the boundary, but this is what we described in this paper. So yeah, it's nice to have a pictorial understanding somehow. The second picture is a picture of a wigglyhedron. It's an extremely technical term that my collaborator Vincent Pilot coined last year. And so this is a polytope. I won't go into the details of how it's constructed, but it's constructed essentially, I mean, you can sort of visually see it on the graph. There are these diagrams, which are the vertices, and I've really not explained any of this, but if you stare at the vertices of this polyhedron, you'll see that each vertex is labeled by a particular diagram with some wiggly lines, and two vertices that are connected share all but one wiggly edge. So if you start, I don't know if there's a pointer, maybe not. So if you start here, for instance, and here, so there's this little wiggly edge, there's the big one, and there's this one, and this one has this one and the big one, but it doesn't have this one, it has this other one. So this polyhedron describes somehow certain flips of configurations like this, and it is also related to break groups in some complicated way. But the story I want to tell for this particular work is that it's related to one of the lessons that I mentioned. So this was in 2024, there was a conference in Montpellier in France, and this conference came for me at the end of an 8-week, or this was the 8th week of like 2 months of travel, basically. And the week before this conference, I was traveling with my family. I have 2 young kids, and all of us were sick. And we were, we had some kind of gastric horrible thing, and we were exhausted. And like the conference, I came to the conference and I thought, oh, I'm exhausted. I don't think I can do this conference, but I was there. And I realized that Vincent Pilot was in the audience, and I had a question to ask him, and I didn't know him. And I didn't know what he looked like. And so at the coffee break, we just happened to bump into each other. And I said, oh, you're Vincent, and I have a question for you. And he said, okay, well, you'd better ask me now because I'm leaving after lunch. And I said, oh, okay, all right then. So I set up an appointment at lunch. We spoke for an hour and a half. And this is the sharing your ideas part. It's quite confronting again, but I did it. Thank goodness, because then at the end of that 1.5 hours and 2 Zoom meetings later, he sent me 17 pages of beautifully written and illustrated mathematics. And I thought, and he said, this is a paper. And I thought, oh, okay, that's great. That's great. So it was really just serendipitous. So I think it's just sometimes, things just work out, but they won't if you don't try. So that's my story. And then the last picture that I have is, I won't be able to say too much about this, but these 2 curves, which are in a paper joined with Oelke-Felek from 2024, are supposed to demonstrate somehow, in a way that I will say a couple of words about, but they're supposed to demonstrate the unfaithfulness of the Borel representation for something called the A3 tilde graph. So I didn't say anything about this, but this is the same Borel representation that I mentioned before, but it's a slightly different incarnation of it, a much easier incarnation of it, which was still unknown. It was still unknown whether it's faithful or not. And so these curves, again, I won't say a lot about this, but if you can see, the numbers are repeating. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's also color coded. But it's supposed to be, this is supposed to be a picture, an unfolded picture of 4 points in an annulus. So if you imagine a ring, an annulus, and have 4 points on the annulus, this is like having 4 points in a plane, except you have them in a ring. And then if you cut open the ring and you unfold it and take several copies of it, you would get a picture like this where the points repeat. So this is secretly supposed to be a picture or 2 pictures of curves on an annulus, which have been drawn in an unfolded way just to make them visually easier. And if you stare at these curves long enough, you'll convince yourself that no matter how you wiggle them, if you try to draw them on the same picture of dots, they will intersect. I'll wait for people to try and verify this. It takes a moment, but for instance, if you try to draw this curve here, around this point 4, you have to get out this way, but this curve goes around, and so it will intersect no matter how you wiggle them around. So these 2 curves have an intersection, but because of some properties of the action of the associated braid group on these curves, you can compute some other pairing, which is like a matrix pairing for the Borel representation, and the matrix pairing is trivial. So the matrix pairing is trivial, but these curves have a non-trivial intersection, and so that shows that the Borel representation is unfaithful. It sends some very large element of the group to the identity, so that the large element that's non-trivial to the identity matrix. So that's exactly the same problem, but for this other type. And just a story, this particular problem, it's very pictorial, but the pictures actually came as an afterthought. So originally the problem was solved by looking at an equivalent action of the brain group on a category which we computed by computer. So this example was actually found by a computer search. And then we went back and drew the picture. So the picture actually is not so bad in the end, but it took, even after we had the element, it took us a while to draw the picture. And I have a bonus photograph just to end, which I'll let you guess what this is. So this was, I was really desperate because I really wanted to draw these pictures. And this was in my office. This is the floor of my office where I'm trying to reconstruct these curves using markers and string. And sometimes you just have to sit down and do that. So I'll end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's really interesting, but perhaps you have some questions for Asalata on her journey, on her maths, on anything to do with what she's, anything.
So in your second last slide, where you're showing the north shape, am I right in guessing that one of those pictures is the rotation of the Earth?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But again, the pictures came after the fact, so it's possible. It is possible that you're right. But
Yeah, so we can try with Alfie one more time.
So I don't know.
You want a picture?
That-
Let's see if I can share it.
I'm happy to share them if you like.
Point to the computer.
Actually, maybe if you could just I'll just this way. No, can't. Huh.
Try again.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right, actually. I hadn't thought of that. Very good. Somehow, as I said, I didn't think pictorially at first. Well, thank you. Yeah.
So the next question will be, well, is there any significance for that?
Well, I'll have
We
to
can
think about that.
discuss
Yeah.
Okay.
Why did you come to Australia?
Oh, ANU solved my Peabody problem.
Ah, right.
But I'm also very happy. Yeah.
I'm interested to know how you got into maths in the first place. Why was it?
Unfortunately, there isn't a very interesting answer to that question. I just always really enjoyed maths and kind of just kept going. And I always thought, if I ever don't like this, I'll do something else. And then that point hasn't yet come. And so maybe it will come at some point.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I love the presentation, although I didn't really understand much of the diagrams are fascinating. So I'm actually from an engineering background, and I'm having interest in this field called mathematical optimization and operations research. Of course, I do have plans to get a doctorate once I do have clarity. My question is that there's often a time, I think, when everybody is contemplating these decisions that you need to think about how theoretical one needs to be, or you need to kind of break the theoretical part and go into the applied maths side, because then it's more industry viable. How do you make a decision about how theoretical you want to be and how theory, how applicable you want to be that to the industry, and how do you decide in what percentage you want it afterwards?
Yeah, again, actually, yeah, great question. I mean, I still think about that, but again, I don't have a very interesting answer to this. So when I was an undergraduate student, I did a research project in representation theory, and I really loved it. And so I just sort of kept going. And of course, there's quite a lot of applied representation theory out there, but the groups that I ended up working with just had a pure focus. And so I think it was more a product of where I was and who I was talking to rather than any conscious decision. So yeah.
Okay. said you started supervising last year. What's been the biggest surprise in that journey as a PhD student?
I think it's I don't know if it's a surprise, but it's finding my own like style rather than what my supervisor's style was. So I think that's been I hadn't really thought about what my supervisor's supervising style was until I started supervising. And so that's been a little bit of a surprise to find out, oh, maybe actually I have quite a different style, and that's okay.
We have plenty of time.
Oh, I'm just gonna ask, since the forum today is women in mathematics, I just feel like it's nice to have like a support system of a fraternity of women who can really help us with a lot of ideas, because I feel like every woman who's pursuing a doctor is probably a very different phase of people. So I was just wondering if it's possible to get a support system out of the community of women who are in very, very different stages of their life.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, that's a great question. I would say there are already some avenues for this. For example, the Australian Maths Society has a group, a WIMSIC group, which is, I would say that's one support system. Other than that, I'm sure there could be more. So yeah, within the university and outside, I don't know what you have.
Right now, yes, thank you so much.
Okay, if there's no other questions, you want to get in the last minute because we do have time, and while we have our Salava here, we've it's a really good chance to interrogate her.
We can bring her up again afterwards, if people have questions.
That's
Then
fine.
think about it.
Yes. You will be staying. Yes, all right. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was interesting.
So yeah, so let's see if we can get Alfie comes back and finish her journey, hopefully. So Alfie, are you here?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect. So let's try again.
Before I close my video, I'm so sorry for that problem, and I will try my best to wrap it up.
And if
I'm
you can
gonna close
speak a
my
bit
video.
louder, if you can speak a bit louder, perfect.
Okay, okay. So I'm gonna close my video now and start again. Or not start again, but go back to where we stopped. All right. So as mentioned earlier, the first outcome of me being able to go to Brazil was the opportunity to organize the SIMPA school in the Philippines. And this is held in Negros Oriental State University. So as mentioned, this is, I'm not sure if where we ended earlier, but this is me in this group photo of the SIMPA school in the Philippines. And this is Professor Samuel Lopes. He is a professor from University of Porto in Portugal, and he is one of the invited speakers. And he told me, Alfie, there is an opportunity in my university you can try. So the opportunity that he was referring to are postdoc positions, because at this time I have already graduated in my PhD, and I'm really looking forward towards international engagements. And this is the second opportunity that he told me. There was another one. This is the second one, and it's a postdoctoral position in his university. And it's a very competitive position. It had 46 applications around the world. Thankfully, I did not know this before, that there were 46 applications. And we just held actually our interview just last week. Yeah, just last week. And I'm very, very happy that I fortunately won the first place of this position. So there will be there are three postdoc positions, and I won the first one. And I'm very, very happy for this opportunity. Of course, they might not have happened if I did not dare to ask to give a talk. So just recalling this was the effect of me asking if I can give a talk in the Brazil SIMPA workshop. So if I did not ask the question, I would have not went to Brazil with the funding. And in the Brazil SIMPA school, I met Nicola. And because of him, we were able to organize the SIMPA school in the Philippines. And in the Philippines, in the SIMPA school, I met Professor Samuel Lopes, who told me about the opportunities, and I would have not gotten the postdoc position because I would have not been aware of it, essentially. And also Professor Samuel Lopes, together with other people, helped me a lot in improving my postdoctoral proposal. And all of these cascades of events did not happen if I did not dare to ask to give a talk. Now also in 2022, there is an event called the GABI, Groups and Algebras in Bicocca for Young Algebraists in Milan in 2022. And I was also very much privileged that I was able to attend. And Wolfgang Bock, the professor, my mentor, always tells me in every event, you should take out everything you can from the event so that it's not a waste of time. So there are 3 outcomes of me for this conference in Milan. The first one is during the poster presentations. So I was one of the poster presenters, and as you can see here in the photo, there's a lot of presenters and there's a lot of people going around of their presentation. And my presentation is there. It's a very lonely presentation. There was not much of people going there, unfortunately. So as someone who really traveled far from Philippines to Italy, it's kind of sad if people don't go to your presentation. That's the reality of it. Now, Wolfgang told me that I should talk to people. One of the many things he tells me to talk to people. And during this poster session, I remember that there was someone who went to my poster during the time that it was already going home time. So meaning people are not there anymore. People are already sweeping, trying to put off their presentations, and someone was there in my presentation still reading it for some reason. And I remembered what Wolfgang told me to talk to people, and that person is a people. So I went to her, and thankfully she was very much interested in my poster, and we became friends. After the poster presentation, we hanged out, and this is, of course, and just just recall that I should talk to people, and this is what I'm here for, to present my poster. So I went to her, and we became friends. And this is Professor Ramla Abdelatif from University of Picardie Jules Verne in France. And we became friends afterwards. So much so that she invited me in November in the same year in her university in Picardie. Also, I introduced Professor Ramla Abdelatif to Flor de Melan Johan, one of my close friends, who's also doing PhD at the time, or who was about to do PhD at the time. And now Flor is about to graduate within this year and having Ramla as her external supervisor. And also, Ramla visited Philippines. She visited our university, gave, I think, 2 weeks of lectures at the time, and she was also the speaker of a conference that we organized at that time. So that was the first outcome for me of this Milan conference. The second outcome is because of Wolfgang's second advice to me during this time, which is to ask question. During conferences or workshops, even online, Wolfgang always tells me to ask a question, even if I don't understand the presentation. I always try my best to ask a question. Indeed, in this event, me and my friends, Cristobal and Ivan from Malaga, Spain, we had a common question during this Milan conference. And we asked the question to the speaker. Unfortunately, it was not positively received for reasons that we don't know of, but it was not positively received. So we told ourselves maybe we can answer this question by ourselves, by the people we work with, or by ourselves. And so, coming from that certain question, we were able to publish 2 papers coming from that question, and I was also able to be invited in Malaga, Spain, trying to do these 2 papers, or to finish these 2 papers. Going back, so I think we are now in the third outcome. So this is me in this crowd, and this lovely lady beside me is my roommate during this time. She is Monica Kodlinska, and she was at this time a PhD student in Oxford University. I was very lucky that Monica was my roommate, which was organized by the organizers, because if she was not my roommate, there was no chance at all that I will be friends with her, because I will be very shy. She's from Oxford, and I, I feel like I don't have the guts to talk to her. So I'm very, very lucky in that area. After a year of the Gabi conference in Milan, we invited uh, Monica in the Philippines, and she became a lecturer, a speaker in the University of the Philippines, Cebu, and University of the Philippines in Diliman. In the University of the Philippines, Cebu, when we do this certain visits, we sometimes have the chance to mingle with the head of the university. In this case, the head of the university is the president, Attorney Leo Malagar. And we were in a dinner at the time, and Attorney Leo told me, in just very random conversation, he told me that he thinks that in these recent times he doesn't not see students anymore discuss with each other in the university. He said that at his time, he can see students really discussing mathematics, collaborating with each other, doing their assignments, and he cannot see that anymore at this time. And I told him, just a very random thought in my head, what if, Attorney Leo, what if there are whiteboards that are scattered around the university? When the professors, or sorry, the students see that there are whiteboards, perhaps this will tell them to unconsciously, like, let's do our assignments, let's discuss mathematics or other sciences out there, and utilize these whiteboards. So that was the end of it, of our conversation. Without me knowing, this is February of 2023. Literally after a month after our conversation, Attorney Leo actually really put out the whiteboards. He installed whiteboards in the common benches of the university. I think there are roughly 10 common benches, such as what you see here, and in each of them there are whiteboards. So in this particular photo, we see that my friend told me that this was the exam week. So the students were going to the university even at night, trying to study together. And so when I first saw this photo, I was so happy. I was literally, I really wept, because it's so nice to see young students try their best to learn and to do better in their studies. And also, it was a very good reminder of me that simple conversations, very even random conversations, could actually have a very nice impact. And lastly, or not lastly, but the third one, that the effect of the Gabi conference was me, Monica, my roommate from Oxford. We had the idea to organize a workshop in the Philippines, and after 4 years, after 4 years, this was materialized. This is the topology and algebras workshop in the Philippines, which was actually just held 2 months ago, January, in Bohol, in the Philippines. And also, this workshop is very meaningful to me and Monica, because this was the culmination of a program that we created together. And this is Mentis, the mentorship program. This was created by myself, Wolfgang, Monica, and Professor Mark Pengitor from Polish Academy of Sciences in Poland. What is Mentis? Basically, just like how I had the opportunity to work with Professor Roozbeh Hazrat outside the Philippines, not many students in the Philippines have this opportunity to meet someone, to meet an international professor, by international I mean foreign professor, who they want to work with. I'm just lucky that my supervisor knows Professor Roozbeh, but many others don't have this opportunity. So the Mentis or the mentorship program aims to be the bridge in doing this. Basically, we aim to connect international experts to Filipino students for supervision. And as of the moment, these are the professors or the mentors who um, joined in the club. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13, 13 professors who are actively looking for students in the Philippines. And during the workshop, the workshop earlier, we were able to connect students in a special session with the professors. And during this session, they were assessing if it was a fit, if the student is a fit for them for supervision. And as of speaking right now, we have 12 success stories. We were able to connect 12, I think 12 or 13, 12 students from the Philippines to speak to to experts abroad. So I'm very, very happy. And if, by the way, so I'm just gonna advertise to, if anyone who wants to also be a part of the mentorship program, feel free to contact me or through Roozbeh perhaps. And we are very much welcome to add you in the list. And hopefully we can find a dedicated Filipino student for you to mentor. So, going back in the 2019 Asia-Australia Algebra Conference, where it was, just recalling, it was my first international experience mathematically, and also personally my first international flight or visit, and where I did not win the Gordon Preston Prize, but I really tried. In 2022, so at this time, I was already in Sydney doing my 1-year fellowship. And another Australia Algebra conference was being held in Queensland. And again, the Gordon Preston Prize was being awarded to the best student presenter. And I tried to have my best presentation, tried to bag the prize after how many years? 2019, 20, 21, 22. After 3 years, I'm very grateful that finally I won the Gordon Preston Prize. And indeed, it took me 3 years to fulfill this dream of mine. It was really a dream of mine to have this prize. And what I can say is, indeed, we just need to keep the faith, and our dream is our battle. So we need to be a fighter. And a quote coming from myself that I actually put in my dissertation too, which I abide in my life, in my academic and professional life. Passion is the fuel, but it takes guts to ignite. If there is no guts, our passion and our dreams will be kept in our sleep. In our sleep where there is no reality. But if we have guts, you can really ignite something beautiful. And lastly, to end my presentation, this is a very nice quote that I have heard from a friend, but actually this I think is already out there in literature, but I heard this from him, from Professor Jose Luis de Silva from Portugal. He said, the value of a person does not lie on the quantity which is able to receive, rather on the quantity which is able to give. And this is where I will end my presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience and for listening. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Alfie? While we're here and connected, the connection seems good.
Yuri, same question as last, how did you get into maths in the first place? Is somebody else to repeat the question?
How did I go to maths in the first place?
How did you get into mathematics?
Okay. It's a very unclimactic answer, to be honest with you. So I think it was destiny, because my answer is this, why it's destiny. Because during our college times, where you ask yourself what you're gonna do, sciences, mathematics, or something else, there was a line, and I wanted to go to engineering, because in my very naive mind at that time, engineering is where money is is where is money. So and there was a queue, and the queue was engineering, and there was a queue for bachelor's of science in mathematics. And I was like, okay, I am a really I'm lazy to go to the long queue of engineering. So I went to mathematics. So that is the very unclimactic answer that I could give, which is the reality. But before that, the reason why I went to engineering is because I already am fascinated with mathematics. But I think my naive mind just went for engineering at that time. But also, what I like about it is the challenge you have in it, and the opportunity to talk to people because of discussions. During discussions, I really like that you can hang out with your friends in a very mind cultivating way. So yeah, that's my answer.
That's a good one. I love the bit about the queue.
Destiny.
Any other questions? We might get some more really surprising answers.
I might follow up to that. So, so I mean, I think it's interesting. So I'm from Indonesia, in many ways like Philippines, right? And where it's almost unheard, you don't grow up thinking about doing a maths degree, right? So how do you feel about, how can we get more people in, say, in Southeast Asia to consider that path, so it doesn't have to be an accident to so many people?
Okay, so I agree with you. I think for us, coming from Indonesia and from Philippines, I think there's a very huge part that we can improve more in giving representations internationally for mathematics. So one thing that I can say, what we need is actually really exposure. Before, I cannot understand why there's a lot of talks online, why it's important. But actually, during these times, we see what is out there, and that is what, during this laborious mathematics workshops, you'll never know if someone is really inspired during that talk, or if someone has an idea. So I would say to have this is through exposure, through workshops. And at the same time, I think this is what we are trying to do with the mentorship program in the Philippines. It's a very small initiative at this point. We have 12 success stories, but the hope there is that slowly we bring in foreign experts in the Philippines and have it slowly grow. And actually, coming from Indonesia, one of the success story is an Indonesian. So that's one something that I'm very happy about.
Thank you. Any other questions? What do you see yourself doing in a couple of years?
What do I see is doing? Is that the question?
Yes, where do you think you will be working? What will you be doing in a few years?
Okay. So I am seeing myself being settled in Portugal because in a very personal matter, I am getting married to a Portuguese in, in, two, in 2 weeks' time. So I'm seeing being myself settling there. And so that is why also I was very keen on looking for opportunities in Portugal. But what I see myself, I really hope that I can continue what I've been doing, not only for myself but for the Philippines. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So I see myself as having the Mentis initiative grow and grow more and more. That in few years time, that I can see not only 12 people but hopefully hundreds of people who were able to do mathematics coming from Philippines or any areas in Southeast Asia. Um, that's it, I would say.
Okay, thank you. It will be very interesting to see how the program grows.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Further questions, anybody? Okay, well, thank you. Let's all thank Alfie.
Thank you, everyone.
Should we take a break for about 10 minutes? Sure. I think that would be good. There's some bathrooms outside and not there. There might probably places where one can get a glass of water or a drink of water somewhere. So that's 10 minutes, which means we'll come back at about let's say 3:40 to Jackie's school. Yeah.
Alfie, can you stop sharing?
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I don't know. Sorry.
How many years?
Some years I get it done last year, but yes.
Email address or.
I'm currently doing business admin. So one of the admin officers for the environment.
Are you actively in the?
Yeah, so it's good. They just back to me to.
Issues.
I believe we're strong. Thank you for permission to. And I apologize for the thing that I'm waiting for.
Maybe next year we can.
I mean, internally, because this is part of what we're doing. Internally, Yammer, at the moment, engagement is so, yeah, change. So, if a particular event is based, then the business admin team are going to be time of engagement. And engagement's doing like more faculty and more of the, more like what science used to do. The engagement team for CDMS and for NVE did things very differently. We did a lot more. But they don't do that now. So, I don't know.
The market is right on the responsible for us. I don't know. So, I mean, I think as you said, everybody's moving around.
For the whole thing. Which is why they're not doing most of the school-based events. The school-based events are going to be run by someone.
I don't know how it's how. But I think second round.
A lot of events.
I don't know if Marcy wanted to.
Glenda? Yeah. She got very well and took some time off. Yeah, and she, when the reset came, she just resigned. Yeah. So,
Yes.
which I understand. But look, you know, I don't know, because they're not talking about this exactly the needs now. I don't know if I'm going to be staying here. Because, look, I don't know why now. I've been doing events for some years now, and it's really done big events, you know. That was like, yeah, I'm doing this is like, I was kind of the one that had reset because I was actually I couldn't do the engagement in the interval. So yeah. Maybe a different skill might have been pretty through. Yeah. Look, I'm just still looking for this point. So, the project code is just yes. Just for well, you know, yeah. I'm learning how to do a thing, putting together a procedure.
So Jackie, is this sort of? No, this one, sorry. My chair, yeah. Sorry, the chair, yeah. All right.
We can move it somewhere or?
No.
Oh, there's, because the camera comes from here, and so if we're filming it, then it's recorded on the screen. I don't know, something like that. So that looks like it.
He has the more. Yeah, the previous one.
I'm just even.
That's
Yeah.
That's great. This extra nose here, up the nose.
No, we had to.
Chairs a table or something.
Sage.
I want to ask you about the big differences, like, I'll ask that in a second. Everyone can do.
We should.
Oh, that sounds impressive. Sounds.
Yeah, I'm just looking at something.
This is UK for some people. Plymouth with them leaves.
And I think
Just over a year ago.
yeah, that's the discussion of the workers.
But I get there's so many universities.
I just is the pointer working on.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Isn't that big? Well, I mean, it's I don't know.
And there was as a result.
I'll check that. It's not. We'll have a presentation.
But it's easy to send someone what's the name this today. Yes, so it's not like, oh, it's not way back. Yeah.
It's 43. It depends on how you count them. We're doing from the report that I reckon Gallagher and others count the universities. Well, I thought that's straightforward. Yeah, that's right. Count all the colleges. Well, the College of Vicinity is a table B university, which I know. No, sorry. Table A. No, I don't think so. There's four table B at the moment. The Bachelor and Divinity are table A, which I sort of don't think is universities. Torrens, should know Avondale, and I should know the first one. That's now table A. Table B, now table A. And the fact that I know it's yes. Well, we need to hold Roozbeh is.
So big project. Saying that some of us might get authentic new personal certification.
It is now 3:40, so we can get started again. Our final speaker is Professor Jackie Ramage. So here we're hearing from someone who has been around for a long time. Longer, further advanced in her career than Asalata and further than Alfie. So I could say an awful lot about Jackie because she has been to so many places and done so many things and been involved in so much. I decided to keep it very short. Jackie has interests in algebra, analysis, and geometry, and something I didn't know till a couple of days ago. You did your PhD under Roger Carter. I did. Yeah, I was really impressed. I did not know that. So I find that really impressive. Jackie's worked at a variety of places, including the University of Newcastle, University of Wollongong, University of Sydney. Was for a time executive dean at Durham University in the UK, and just talking earlier, Maggie told me she turned up there at the start of 2020. A very interesting year for academics and academia. Came back to Australia a few years ago, to somewhere in South Australia, and is currently a Deputy Vice Chancellor at James Cook University. She's been involved in all sorts of mathematical initiatives and involved with lots and lots of things, and we're lucky she'll talk about some of them. She's a fellow of the Royal College of New South Wales. She's been a friend with maths at Western Sydney. I remember a meeting with the centre when you came along and you were I think, on the board and giving us advice and so on, and that's probably partly why we're so good. And really importantly, Jackie's responsible for us having to put those horrible things up our nose for COVID testing. So, and there's a good story in that. Anyway, if Jackie forgets about it, you can ask her about it at the end, but we'll hear from Jackie.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Direct country, where no land that was never ceded. So I'm very grateful to be here. Kurt, I want to start actually by thanking you for continued stewardship of mathematical sciences in general at Western Sydney. I think it's great for mathematics generally to be strong around the country. I think that's really important. So the first time I ever gave this talk, it was actually called My Life in Maths. And it was at the Young Women in C-Star Algebras conference in UC Leuven. And I was invited to give 2 talks. And I think originally they had intended for me to give 2 maths talks, but I gave 1 maths talk and then I gave this talk, My Life in Maths. And I said, this is a complete experiment, let me know how it goes. And somebody there told me, you should give that talk at every possible opportunity. So any fool can follow instructions. So here I am giving this talk at any possible opportunity. But I have had to change the title now that I've it's more than maths. And I've stripped it of a lot of the mathematics. There will be no mathematics on the page, even though I may talk about it, because I give it to many people around, different disciplines and different areas. So that's what the talk was around. But, so it's a prologue and then 3 acts, my student days, my academic days, and my management days. Well, I prefer leadership, but anyhow. So the prologue, let's start with the prologue first. And now it's late in the day, right? You've already had 2 talks, but everybody talks about imposter syndrome. And if there's one thing you should take away from the talk, it's this. So once I finish this slide, you can all go back to sleep. If we're all good, I'll just keep talking and finish and then we'll be done. But imposter syndrome, from my perspective, this is the best sort of summary of it that I've come across. And that is that there is a difference between perception and reality. There are things that you know, and people around you know a whole heap of other things that you don't know. And the brain is very, very good at smoothing things out and generalizing. Whereas in fact, the reality is you know some stuff, individuals know some stuff which overlaps with your stuff, which is different. Most of them know roughly what you know. Some know more, some know less. There are some special individuals who do know a lot more. But generally speaking, it's this overlapping sort of spectrum of knowledge, which your brain just assumes that everybody knows everything that everybody else knows. And that's not the way it works. And so the first message you should take away from this is you are better than you think. Okay, now some of you can go to sleep if that's all you wanted. So now there's this thing where, people ask you who are the most influential people in your lives, and typically there's at least one teacher in there. And it's no different with me, but by far the most influential person in my life was my grandmother. So I was born in London to Spanish immigrants. And so my first language is actually Spanish, and my native language is English, which is a very privileged situation to be in, because it meant when I went to university, I worked my way through university as an interpreter, which I tell you pays better than a checkout chip. So yeah, so I was gifted this skill, which was wonderful. So I used to go back to Spain with my grandmother every year, and bear in mind, early on in my life, that would have been a fascist dictatorship. So I was heading back to Franco's Spain in those first few years. And my grandmother is the one on the far left on the right-hand picture, and on the right in the left-hand picture. And those pictures were taken 20 years apart, and you can tell what good food and so on does to you, right? I mean, there's a big difference in those pictures. So anyhow, I partied in Spain and I studied in the UK. That's the way I put it. And trust me, that's the right way around to do it. And then the other person who was really influential in my life was my high school English teacher, and his name was Terry Furlong, and unfortunately he's passed away, and I miss him dearly. But this man was amazing. So he taught me English from year 7 equivalent in the UK. And he wanted me to do A-level English. So in the UK, you focus on sort of some studies at years 11 and 12. And I wanted to do mathematics as well. And so when it came to actually scheduling the classes, the head of sixth form had clashed 5 of the 6 hours for English and mathematics. So there was only, you know, it seemed to me I had to make a choice. So I went to Terry and I said, Terry, look, I'm really sorry. It seems like I'm going to have to make a choice. If I'm going to have to choose, I'm going to choose mathematics. So I'm really sorry about that. And then he did something which completely blew me away. And bear in mind, I was 16 at this point, so this was a turning point in my life. He asked me, do you want to do it? And I looked at him and I said, yes, I want to do it. And then he said, then we'll make it happen. And I thought, oh my God, you can make things happen. This is so amazing. So he did. He was the head of English at the time. And there were, of the 6 hours, 3 were taken by one lecturer, 3 were taken by another teacher. And he assigned himself to the 3 hours that I couldn't make any of. And he assigned another teacher to the other 3 hours. And I took that class and he met with me for 1 hour after school every Friday to catch up on the rest of the stuff that I couldn't do. And so I did A-level English as well as A-level mathematics. You can make things happen. Okay, so now academia. So the academic cast is roughly the players that will be appearing throughout, and you will see us age, right? So that's me in the top left, that's David next over, and so on. As we go through, you'll see those of us age. So firstly, there were my student days. And so first year and the first compromise. So David and I actually met in my first year at Warwick. I mean, you know, I was a baby. I called him cradle snatcher, but anyhow. David was doing a master's with Di Evans, and Di moved to Swansea. Now, he was doing a master's in operator algebras, and David made the decision to stay at Warwick and do his PhD with Klaus Schmidt in ergodic theory instead. And he did that in order to stay with me. And so this talk will be full of remarks and observations, and I'll gather some of them at the end with summaries. So the first remark is that David was the first to compromise his career. Life is full of compromises, but it's very important to note that David was the first one who compromised. Okay, then the next is the strange case of the missing third. This is all in chronological order, right? So Caroline Series was the only woman on the faculty at Warwick University where I was doing my studies. And she taught us analysis, really ironic, right? Caroline Series teaching us sequences and series. And I was on the staff student liaison committee, and she said that she thought we were 50-50 women in the class, 50% women in the class. And I said, I really don't think so. And she said, well, when I look around the lecture theatre, I see roughly half the lecture theatre as women. I'm like, okay. So I went and I checked, and a third of the first year cohort were women. So my conclusion is, well, at least half the men weren't turning up to class, right? That's the only conclusion you can draw from those 2 pieces of data. So that was the strange case of the missing third. And then I ended up doing a PhD at Warwick. I applied to a couple of other places, but David was still at Warwick. So I stayed at Warwick and I started doing a PhD with Roger Carter on Katz-Moody groups. And so Katz-Moody groups are like infinite rank versions of groups of Lie type. So, you know, and they are to Katz-Moody algebras as groups of Lie type as to Lie groups. So algebra, you know, sort of infinite rank, but nevertheless algebra. So the remark here is this was hardly a compromise on my part, because this is actually what I wanted to do anyway. So sometimes it's actually easy. But then, of course, David finished his PhD, and it was a question of what to do next. And so there was a postdoctoral position in Australia working with Ian Raven and Colin Sutherland at UNSW on operator algebras. And the advert said things like 500 meters from the beach or something like that. And frankly, I was predisposed to Australia anyway, because I don't know, those of you who may have seen the 7 Up series, it's a social experiment. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. But anyhow, there was one of the guys ended up in Australia, and I thought that looks nice. So anyhow, I encouraged David to take it. So he did, and we spent 2 years on opposite sides of the world. So we would travel, we would basically spend the summers in the right places. So some January's in Australia and July's in the UK, although David complained that the temperatures were way too cold in July in the UK, so very quick to acclimatize in that way. So yes. And then in 1990, I was still doing my PhD, and there was a conference in Durham, Groups and Combinatorics, and David and I attended, well, David came as a accompanying spouse, so to speak, and we went for a hike with Cheryl Prager, and this was the first time I met Cheryl Prager, and she's an amazing person, amazing friend. And I told Cheryl that I was considering leaving academia because I felt the chances of solving the two-body problem were slim, right? So as it's already come up in Asalata's talk about solving two-body problems, and this is a major issue. And Cheryl said, why don't you try it and see what happens? And so I did. So I guess, you know, it's Cheryl's fault I'm still here because I tried it and this is what happened. So interesting to note as an observation is that Cheryl was the second woman professor of mathematics in Australia in 1983. And actually mathematics was well ahead of the curve because the first woman professor of mathematics was in 1967. There was Hannah Neumann at the ANU. And if you look at, so you'll see later that this is definitely quite unusual, but nevertheless, it's still embarrassing, right? It should be embarrassing to everybody. But anyhow, there'll be more. So then, for the way that the things were funded in the UK meant that I had to have done a master's in my first year and then 2 years of PhD. So my third year of PhD, I had no money. And my supervisor went on sabbatical to MIT. And so I said, well, is there any chance I could go with you? And he said something which has stuck with me. He said he'd have to argue I was one of his best students, which was not true. Now, this is interesting because it was a bit harsh, I think. I mean, it was true, but he could have said it a bit more diplomatically. I always think, you know, my definition of a diplomat is somebody who can tell you to go to hell and make you look forward to the trip. He was not making me look forward to the trip, right? And I could have questioned the logic. Now, in retrospect, knowing what I know now, I don't think he would have had to say that. I think he would have had to say, I want to bring her with me. And then that would have been okay. But anyhow, I didn't question that logic. But anyhow, so there I was faced with a year in Warwick with no scholarship, my partner in Australia, and my supervisor in MIT. What am I doing here? So I came to Sydney. And I came with no money. I just came to stay with David. And I wrote up my PhD on the kitchen table. David used to brew beer in a bucket in the kitchen. And so he would sit there going, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I would get so frustrated that I would punch the bucket and it would go, blah, 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 blah. And then it would give me 5 minutes of peace. So that's how I wrote my thesis up in a table in Randwick. Okay, so then academic days. So I did not do a postdoc at all. Because what happened, again, the two-body problem, Ian Rayburn, one of David's postdoc supervisors, moved to be head of school at the University of Newcastle in Australia. And David was offered a contract teaching and research position. And so I moved to Newcastle. Now, there were no algebraists there, really. There was one who wasn't particularly active. Everyone was an analyst. So I ended up doing some analysis. So I worked in operator algebras, functional analysis. The work on functional analysis is a Hugg type inequality which helped to solve some cases of a bound Kohn conjecture. So really beautiful stuff, actually, I have to say, even if I say something. And then I was offered an ongoing position in 1993, and David's was converted to ongoing. So we'd solved that two-body problem. And so here's a message: when life serves you lemons, lemonade, you know, just deal with it, get on with it, because you never know what's around the corner. Now, one of the things that was really amazing about the experience with Ian is he treated everybody as equals. And I remember him sending me to a meeting on his behalf once. I was a level A, maybe at the time, maybe level B. And I went to this meeting and it was a bit bizarre. And anyhow, when I came back, he said to me, well, what happened? And I said, well, so-and-so said this, which is really absurd. And he said, well, did you say anything? And I said, well, no, you know, I'm level B, he's a professor. And Ian looked me in the eye and he said, never underestimate your influence in this institution. And I thought, whoa, so it's another of those stand back moments, right? It kind of blew me away. It's like with Terry. There are a couple of times when people just say something and it redirects you, it refocuses you. And that was one of those times. So we solved our two-body problem, and then came the family. And so we've got two kids, Adrian and Daniel, and they're quite different, as you can tell by the first picture for each one. Adrian on the top, he just did not believe in sleeping. And so I was like, God, why would anyone sleep during the day? This is a waste of time. So whenever he actually fell asleep, we would just leave him wherever he was. You can see he's still got his shoes on. We dared take his shoes off because he might wake up. Whereas Daniel, on the other hand, the bottom picture, like so relaxed, you've no idea. So quite different. And really, there is no best time to have children. People keep asking, when's the best time to have children? I don't know. I don't know. I had them then. There is no best time to have children. But if you think it's worth doing, you should do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But one thing that is very clear is that childcare makes it possible, particularly in academia, because it is so common for people to be far away from their families and to not have that family support, that it's almost, not almost impossible, but really, really hard to have children without childcare facilities. So, okay, so then this was still in Newcastle, and at some point there was some shenanigans going on, and we were getting this really. And I remember David calling me. He had the office on level 2, an office on level 2. I was on level 1, and he actually called me. He didn't even bother walking down the stairs, and said, I think we might be better off somewhere else. And I'm like, okay, we'll start looking. And so, you know, shifting 2 people is not easy. And at that time, Aidan was also looking for a job. He was on an ADP, so he was free money, but he had no substantive position. So his ADP was going to finish. It was like the precursor of the Decrus, right? So he needed to think about what he was going to do. So all 3 of us were applying for positions. And David was feeling a bit guilty about this, thinking, well, what if, you know, we're taking jobs away from Aidan? I'm like, that's a crazy idea. Firstly, Aidan's really, really good. So it's not obvious that they'd want us instead of him. I mean, bear in mind, Aidan was only 18 months out of PhD at this point, so nobody else really knew how good he was except us and the people who'd given him the DECRA, or the ATP. And I said, and besides, he's cheaper, you know, he's younger. So, and if we leave, there'll be jobs at Newcastle that he could apply for. So don't worry about it. Why don't you go talk to him? So he did, and Aidan was really happy to be talked to. And at some point, I had this discussion with Ian. I was telling Ian about this, and I said, besides which, you know, all of this applying for jobs, we should just sell ourselves as a team. Just imagine how good it would be for somewhere to take all 3 of us. And Ian looked at me and he said, that's a bloody good idea. He said, now I'm congenitally incapable of doing that, but count me in. So I started selling a team of 4 mathematicians around the country. So I'd be calling the heads of school and saying, hey, I know that this is a conversation you're going to have with the dean, and but you know, I need to go through you first. And so I'm happy to have the conversation with the dean. Well, what do you think about this? And they were like, what? What are you thinking about? It had never been done in mathematics. It's quite common in other disciplines, had never been done in mathematics. Margaret Shield, who is now Vice Chancellor at QUT, at that point was DVC research at Wollongong. And she was the only woman DVC research in the country. And I was director of the Women at U of N program, which is a program for both academic and professional staff, women, who for mentoring and for professional development and so on. And I had deliberately invited Margaret to come and give a talk because she was the only woman who was DVC research in the country, right? So she and I are in a room in Newcastle. She's setting up her presentation, and she turns to me and she said, so what do you do? And I said, well, my substantive position is as a mathematician. And she said, oh, I like mathematicians, they're cheap. And I said, well, I'm selling some, would you like to buy? And she said, well, maybe, send me some stuff. So I sent her some stuff, and I in fact sent her stuff about everybody in Newcastle. I sent information about everybody. And she and the head of informatics at the time, of the Faculty of Informatics, the dean, and Ian Raven and I met, and basically she appointed 4 people that UOW didn't need strategically. Now, there is context here because Ian was on the inaugural highly cited list, and so that was a good buy. David was in the top 1% by citations at the time, so that's a good buy. Aidan was free money, as I say. And then there was me. And so when she was going down the list, she said, oh, and you and David will want to come as associate professors because, you know, got to be worth your while for the move. And I said, look, I really don't care what level I come at. I'm happy to come in as a senior lecturer if that means we can bring more people with us. And she said, no, I've already told you, if you'd been at UOW, you would have been an associate professor a long time ago. So tick. Okay, so ended up with a promotion out of it too. So now, during this whole time, Ian had been saying to me, you know, this is a really low probability outcome. You've got to make sure you keep your research up and you keep doing all your stuff because this is unlikely to come to pass. Well, turns out low probability outcomes do happen, right? So yeah, never let people tell you that it can't be done because you never know, it might work out. And never underestimate the power of networks and casual interactions, because that's how that all started with Margaret. Now, this is the other embarrassing point. Margaret Shield was the first woman professor of chemistry in Australia, and that was in 2000. So if we thought maths was bad, spare a thought for chemistry. Okay, so that's that one. Okay, then I ended up as head of school. So 2007, we moved to Wollongong. 2009, they needed a head of school. I got a phone call from John Patterson, who I'd not met face-to-face before. And he said, you may have heard that there's a vacancy in your area. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've heard that. So, well, I'm just ringing you to let you know that my little birdies have told me you might be the right person for this job. And I wanted to make sure that we were going to get an expression of interest from you. And I said, oh, I guess you are then. And he said, and of course, if anybody asks you any questions about this conversation never happened. And I'm like, okay. He said, but I need to see you face to face because I don't appoint anyone without seeing the white of their eyes. I'm like, okay. So I went to see him and he said, I just want to make sure that you know what the job is. And I'm like, well, I'm the meat in the sandwich, you know. What can I say? He said, oh, I'm so glad you understand the job so well. I said, I need to know, though, I'm going to do things differently. I need to know that I'm going to be supported by you. And he said, oh, yeah, we'll give you our full support until such time as we don't. And I'm like, okay, fine, fair enough. Anyhow, there were 8 professors in the school at the time, but I was the only nomination in the end. So I was just appointed. And none of the other professors had a problem with this. This was a good thing. So we did a lot of good things at Wollongong. Lots of good things happened. Unfortunately, some of them have sort of been eroded, but we did do a lot of good things. And I was also appointed to the ARC College of Experts in 2010, and that wouldn't have happened without the research office at Wollongong because they nominated. So I was actually on, because by that time, Margaret Shield was the CEO of the ARC, and I was appointed to the College of Experts in 2010 while I was still an associate professor. So I was unusual at the time. But she was deliberately trying to get more women involved in the ARC, and she thought, well, we have to do this. So she did that. And then I was stopped in my tracks. In 2013, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I didn't renew my term as head of school. I just let it lapse and then somebody else, because I was going to need cover for a significant period. I wanted whoever did it to actually have the recognition of doing it. And so remember, look after yourself. And I'm not very good at that. So, you know, just don't listen to me, but listen to that. Listen to what I say. Anyhow, so then after the cancer, I was sort of finishing my treatment. I was finishing the radiation therapy, and I got a call from the Australian Research Council saying I'd served on the Laureate Fellowship Committee at that point for 2 years, and they wanted me to chair it in 2014. And I was just finishing, this was January when they called me, and I was just finishing radiation therapy. I said, look, I'm going to have to check with my doctor, and I need you to know this. And I know that it would be illegal for you to make any decision on the basis of this, but frankly, I don't care. If this is going to be a problem, let me know. And they said, no, we'll deal with it. And so I did. I chaired the Laureate Fellowships that year. And it was that was also a great story. So by that time, it was Aidan Byrne who was CEO, and he has since told me that I transformed the culture of the Laureate Committee, which I think I did, and I'm very happy I did. For various reasons. And then you can ask me about that later. But anyhow, I finished the treatment and I went to see Paul Wellings, who was a VC at Wollongong. And I basically said, okay, I'm a weapon, deploy me. The prognosis is good. What do you want me to do? And he says, oh, well, you know, there's this. And I'm trying to work out how old you are. So oh, good, because, you know, 5 years as a dean, 5 years as a DVC, average age of appointment of a VC is like, I'm low, whoa. I don't need to be a VC, right? I just want to make a difference. So I don't mind. And he said, no, but your CV, it's a good CV, but, you know, you're a mathematician. Like, okay, well, there's not much I can do about that now. Why? What's the problem? He said, oh, mathematicians, philosophers, they have this reputation for not really being in touch with the world. And I'm like, dude, look what I did with the school. You know, I have outcomes to show that I can do stuff. He said, no, you need something else to sort of shore up your management credentials. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, you should go and do some program, you know, like that one that Philip did last year. So Philip had gone to Harvard Business School to do the general management program. And I said, look, I don't want to do this if it's going to be an impost on the school. So where's the money coming from? And he said, oh, no, this will be funded by the Vice Chancellor's unit. I'm like, okay, oh, fine. So he sent me to Harvard Business School to do the general management program, which was also transformational. So again, proactive, yeah? If you don't ask, the answer will always be no. Okay, so then in that second half of 2014, the University of Sydney started looking for a new head of school. And in fact, I remember James Parkinson was coming to visit me quite often at that point, and he was all worried about it. So, oh, they're looking, we're going to get somebody who's just a management person, and they're not really going to be into mathematics, and then they'll be dead wood when they finish being head of school, and it'll be... Anyhow, I hadn't thought of applying. But then when they shortlisted, Trevor Hamley looked at the list of applicants and the suggested shortlist from the headhunters, and he said, there's no women. And the headhunters said, well, no women applied. And Nalini was on the panel at the time, and she said, well, has anybody asked Jackie? And they said, no, nobody's asked Jackie. So the headhunters called me and asked Jackie. And I said, well, sure, I can apply. And so I hadn't been looking because I didn't need a job. I had a job, right? So there are more people not looking for a job than there are looking for one. And they don't apply is not an excuse. And I can talk more about that too. So now here's another embarrassing statistics. Nalini Joshi was the first woman professor of mathematics at the University of Sydney. She was appointed in 2002. At that point, the University of Sydney was what, 150 years old or something. I was the second woman professor of mathematics at the University of Sydney, and I was appointed in 2015. So anyhow, since then, we managed to change a lot of stuff. But that was definitely the hardest decision I ever had to make, because we talked about it, David and I talked about it, and we decided that I would take the job at the University of Sydney, and David would stay in Wollongong with the kids, and I would work in Sydney during the week, come back for the weekends. And David chose to effectively be a single parent to two boys, aged 17 and 13, and they're roughly contemporary photos of the boys, because he thought I could do great things at UCID. And Daniel on the right there was definitely a handful. So yeah, and so David takes a lot of the credit for this, as well as me, and that is that the School of Maths and Stats at UCID is now the best in Australia, I would say, quite undeniably so by many measures, but also the benefit is felt throughout the country. Because of course, one of the things we did was set up the Sydney Mathematical Research Institute, and that benefits all of Australia, and particularly the Sydney Basin, because by getting visitors to Sydney, you can access them here. So I think that has been a major, major impact on Australian mathematics. But it was by far the hardest decision I ever had to make. And then in June 2019, as I was coming to the end of my term in Sydney, I was again headhunted. I was interviewed for the Executive Dean of Science at Durham University in the UK. And I was interviewed, and Anthony Long, the provost, was the chair of the panel. And I was interviewed in the morning, and I went for a walk and came back, and then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something, he called me and he said, we'd like to offer you the job. So I was still in the hotel in Durham at the time. And he said, can we talk? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I said, let's meet in the castle. Now on the right, you have to understand Durham. So the UK tends to think of Durham as the Oxbridge of the North. Durham thinks of Oxbridge as the Durham of the South, right? That's the way it works. The oldest building in Durham is the castle, which is the picture there. It is actually a castle from the 14th century. it is a college. It is University College. And it is on Palace Green with Durham Cathedral, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, that whole area. And so there's some little tables you can't quite see in the photo right at the far corner, which are little wooden picnic tables, and that's where I was offered the job. And he said to me, well, you know, we know what the salaries are like in Australia, that we can't match that, but here's what we can do. And I said, that's okay. This isn't about money. This is about whether I can make a difference here. I said, by the way, and I'd had the same conversation, of course, with Trevor going to Sydney. My partner's a mathematician. What do you think about 2 jobs? And the answer from Anthony was the same as I'd had from Trevor. And that is, we don't normally do that. We normally appoint on merit. And with Trevor, I had thought, okay, having this conversation is going to erode some social capital. I may not be able to do everything I need to do. So David and I made the decision for David to stay in Wollongong. Commuting to Durham is a completely different kettle of fish, right? And so I thought, okay, at this point, I'm going to have this conversation. And so I said to Anthony, okay, here's the thing. Merit is a myth. And we're really bad at assessing it, particularly relative to opportunity. And if you're faced with a heterosexual couple, it doesn't matter whether the woman is the leading spouse or the trailing spouse. By saying that, you're disadvantaging the woman. Because if she's the trailing spouse, you're implying she's not meritorious, which quite frankly is despicable. If she's the leading spouse, you're putting her in an unconscionable position, because it is still socially acceptable for men to compromise their female partners' careers in order to advance their own, but it is not socially acceptable in the same way for women to do the same. And so by saying that to a woman in a senior position, you're asking her to choose between her family and her career. And that is just, but well, whenever you're doing that, you're just going to get fewer women taking senior positions at the institution. And he stopped him in his tracks and he said, oh, I'd never thought of it like that. And I, well, that's the way it is. And he said, okay, well, we do have some possibilities. Maybe if you sent me a CV. And I said, well, that would be the right answer. And I said it literally word for word. And of course, the maths department there said, well, we'll take him even if she doesn't come. But anyhow, in the end, we didn't. And that was, you know, as I said, 2020 was a bit of an interesting year. But that's why I took the job. I took the job because I thought, here's somebody who I can have very frank conversations with, and I can make a difference here. So the way that we talk about things really matters, particularly whether you listen to other people and take things on board. So I started in 2020, which the timing was not great. Anyhow, because of that, we ended up not seeing each other for 2 years again, but this time really not for the whole 2 years, except for online. And so in late 2022, I was asked about the position of Executive Dean at UniSA STEM. And I thought, yeah, it's time to come home. But then in December 22, I was flying through Heathrow for my second interview. And I had a major medical event, which led to this basically, and hospitalized me for 3 months. And I was housebound for 3 months, and I'm still recovering from that. But the interesting thing was UniSA waited. And I came home and I started working at UniSA in 2023. They still gave me the job, knowing what had happened and everything, and that I would be limited in some of the things that I could do. And UniSA had a motto, you know, put people first. And they really lived that motto. It was really, really impressive. And also David Lloyd has an honorary degree from Unseen University from Terry Pratchett. So I reckon that's another good reason to go and work for the man, you know, anyhow. So that was kind of interesting. And I was there during the merger. So I started working for UniSA in 2023, but I left Adelaide University this year. So UniSA and University of Adelaide merged to form Adelaide University, which formally started in 2026. And everybody was saying, like, some colleagues were saying, oh, people are going to lose their jobs. I'm like, forget it. We're going to have just as many students. We're still going to need to teach, and people will still have jobs. The only people who are going to need to look for jobs are the senior executives, because you're not going to need 2 of everything. But what I did is I committed to staying to UniSA until the end of 2025. So I wanted to make sure that UniSA STEM was stable during that time. And then in September 2025, I got a phone call from a headhunter saying, there's this position at JCU. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, even if something starts now, it's not going to materialize to next year. So sure, I can engage with this one. So the deadline was September the 14th, which was a Sunday. And I got the application in that night. It was maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, so maybe technically late, but you know. I got told I was shortlisted on the Wednesday. A fortnight after that, I was being interviewed online. A week and a half after that, I was being flown up to Townsville to meet people. And the following week, I had the first draft of an offer in my intro. It was like, bam. And so I said to Simon said, you can start in February. And I'm like, I can start in January if you really want me to. And he said, no, start in February, which I think in retrospect is because of the wet season. He wanted me to miss the wet season, you know, it's nothing to do with giving me a rest or anything. But anyhow, in February 26, I started as DVC Academy at James Cook. And the JCU has been on my radar for some time. Basically, it ranked second in Australia for equity, and that equity is really close to my heart, as you can tell from my story. And I'm delighted to be able to help deliver on the mission of the institution. So more than half of the students at JCU are either First Nations, First in Family, or low SES. There's a big medical school there, and more than half the graduates end up practicing in remote and regional Australia. So yeah, it kind of fits with where I want to be right now, what I'm doing right now. So 6th of February, I ended up in JCU. So here's my summary, just in case you thought I was rambling, which I was. But here you go, be proactive. You're better than you think, and you can make things happen. Remember, those are the first 2 slides. Half the men did not attend class. Always check the data, right? Don't just make statements, check the data. David stayed at Warwick and then chose to single parent. So support others whenever you can, particularly for the men supporting women. It's really hard for an underrepresented group to improve its situation on its own. Okay? I wanted to do my PhD at Warwick, so sometimes it's painless to support others and to help others. And perhaps I should have questioned the logic, but I didn't. Always challenge assumptions. You know, do it politely. Remember that definition of a diplomat. So be careful how you tell people to go to hell, but just do it. And it is interesting because it's harder for women to do it, and it's more held against women for speaking up. But nevertheless, I think we still have to. And I went to Australia. I did not do a postdoc, and I just got a job. So follow your instincts. You never know what's going to happen, right? But when life serves you lemon, make lemonade. Just seize the day, carpe diem. And there's no best time to have children. If it's worth doing, do it. That goes for children, that goes for all sorts of other things. Low probability outcomes sometimes eventuate. You need to be in it to win it. And never underestimate the power of networking. Just connect at every possible opportunity. This came up with Alfie, it's come up all over the place, right? Remember to look after yourself. Work is never finished. You need to learn to say no. No, I don't like saying no. I have come up with a strategy to say no by saying yes, and I can share that with you if you like. And then the number of people not looking for a job is always greater than the number of people looking for a job, so they don't apply is not an excuse. And think about what you say and be open to change, because communication really matters. And live your life. Live your life as according to your values. Put people first, because kindness is a competitive advantage. Okay, there you go. Questions?
All right, I've got a pile of questions, but I'll let you all get in first. Cheers.
Thanks. So as someone who has not been hunted for a job, I kind of just imagine that from the story you tell, it kind of sounds like, in some sense, once it's happened once, you sort of get a bit on a roll.
Yeah.
So what do you think like started that role?
The fact that I became head of school at UOW. So once you're in a leadership position, when headhunters are looking for applicants for other leadership positions, they start by just scanning the webs and just looking at the websites and looking to see who's in what position and asking them. So that started it. Being head of school at the University of Sydney accelerated it, because you're more likely to get called if you're from the GOA. And then the fact that I never say no, I never ignore a headhunter. So what I do is if I want to say no to a headhunter, I say, I'm not interested in this opportunity right now, but here are some people you might want to try. And I always try to put forward people who I think would be good, even if they're not in leadership, well, particularly if they're not in leadership positions that would show up on website scans. So, you know, pay it forwards type thing, or pay it whatever you want. And also it makes them grateful, and they keep coming back to call you because I know even if you're going to say no, you're going to give them ideas. And so I always keep the headhunters connected because I'm not interested in looking for jobs. I don't need to look for jobs. I don't want to look for jobs. But I am interested in if something good comes up to know about it. So most of the headhunters that have called me, I actually have relationships with over a long period of time. But the thing that started it, to answer your question, was becoming head of school. I don't know if you found the same thing.
I just want to add, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely agree.
Have to watch out, girl.
How do you find life in management?
How do I find life in management? No different to life anywhere else, except, okay, there is one. Whenever I was amongst colleagues in the mathematical sciences, and as a head of school of the mathematical sciences, when you're talking to colleagues, the only argument that convinces them of anything, is a logical argument. Like, we've always got to work with logic and sense. The minute you start working outside of science in particular, but mathematical sciences in particular, forget logic. It's not about logic anymore. It's about emotions, it's about ideology. It is also about logic, like they can't ignore the data, but you have to put a story with the data. You have to give a narrative of the data, right? I can see that's nodding away now. It's just, yeah, you have to, and you can ask John too, right? Because you've been, it's the same thing, right? Yeah, so it's a different, the difference is in the way you deal with people, you interact with people, and you try and convince them. But other than that, personally, it's always clear to me that I am the meat in the sandwich. And there are times when I have to say no to my colleagues for whatever reason. And I always try to be as transparent as possible. This is why. And I try to explain why. But by the same token, I also spend a lot of time advocating up. A lot of time now. So there are two things about management that suit me. One is that you see almost immediate responses with research, like the thing about the Baum-Kohn conjecture. I've been thinking of extending that for over 10 years until I discovered that in fact Alain Kohn had been thinking about it too, and he couldn't do it. I asked Terry Tao about it and he couldn't do it, and I thought, well, maybe it's not me. You know, whereas with management, things tend to happen relatively quickly, either one way or the other. And the other thing is that I could see that I was making a difference in that role. I don't think everybody is necessarily cut out for management, but it was something I could do. I mean, for example, we talk about extroversion and introversion, right? I did a Myers-Briggs analysis for one of these leadership things that one has to do. And I could see the questions that were targeting extroversion and introversion, right? Only one of the questions was really about introversion and extroversion. That was the one about if you're at a party, do you, at the end of it, feel energized or depleted, right? That goes to the heart of introversion and extroversion. The other things were things like, do you ever run out of things to say at parties? And so on. And I felt like all of those I should have answered, I'm Spanish. I'm Spanish. You know, we get trained to do this stuff from a very early age in my culture. So yeah, so I came out as a raging extrovert. But I think some of that socialization, the ability to talk, sometimes know when to be quiet. It may come as a surprise, but I do know when to shut up. So I do know when to be quiet. Yeah, so those are the things that I found in management that have helped and that have made a difference. I don't know if that helps. Was there something else? Kurt and John might like to add something because they closed.
Well, yeah, in leadership, I think if you're a mathematician, you know, and you talk to upper management and across all subjects, you know, at a university, and you feel now you have proven it, there is mathematical proof you should do it this way, don't ever make the assumption you have won the argument. Yeah. This is, is about compromise, you know, and be an ambassador for your people. I think that's the hardest, you know, to, you think this is optimal and you can do so many things, but still it doesn't mean we are going to do it, you know, sort of. And that is sometimes where I have changed leadership positions, saying is, I was hired for getting the mathematicians in the top 5 in the UK, for instance, but then executive dean, his leadership changed, new vice chancellor, all of a sudden we became the cash cow, you know, and everything we lined up wasn't going to happen. You know, you need to be prepared in leadership positions to be disappointed, you know, from if something like that happens, you know, and still your job is not to tell the people, you know, always smile, you know, let's do some good things in the framework we have, you know, and that's a job, you know,
You tell
it's
them,
hard.
you tell them in a particular way, right? It's about keeping the morale up. It's important to be able to keep morale up.
Yeah. But then you have to be careful in saying, hey, guys, we have everything in place to be top 5 next year.
Yeah.
And then you have to tell them, oh, God, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, as a mathematician, one thing I find kind of shocking about non-mathematicians is that in a committee, you may find somebody will make an argument because person A has made that argument, and even more shocking, because person B is against that argument. And I think for mathematicians, that's really hard to get their heads around.
Yeah, we're congenitally honest. Really, no.
But also less tribal. We're more interested in what the facts are than being on a particular social group.
So this came through with the College of Experts in the ARC. So when I joined, it was ME, Engineering, Mathematics and Informatics. And the engineers would always get antsy because the first few on the list were always mathematicians. And they were beginning to think they weren't going to get funded at all. And then there would be this big tranche of engineers and informatics people. And then at the bottom, there were a whole bunch of mathematicians as well. And the point was, with most disciplines, you give them 10 grants to look at. They're ranking 10 people, 10 grants, same 10 grants, ranking is all over the place. Mathematicians, you give 10 mathematicians the same 10 grants, the top 2 are likely to be the same. And so what you get is this sort of, the skewed, well, bimodal distribution for mathematics. They end up at the top of the ranking, at the bottom. And it used to drive the engineers insane. But I used to say, just get your act together, guys. Get your act together. Anyhow.
Another thing that struck me in your talk was, and from what I know about you personally, is you do seem to have an unquenchable optimism.
Thank you.
And I think that helps a great deal.
Yeah.
Because I think other people respond to that. So you're able to get things done because you're motivating them, even if you're not sort of setting it up to. It's just your optimism is infectious.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I saw that you had to take certain breaks in your career because of your health, and you made these decisions personally about kind of moving and staying away from family. Of course, there's no easy way to kind of strike a balance, but what kept you motivated to kind of, how do you know what's the right thing to do? Because sometimes these are very difficult decisions to make. And the second thing is, how do you get back to your career after having a setback?
So I never took a break in my career, so to speak. So in the sense that I took 12 weeks maternity leave, because that was all I had at the time available. Nowadays in Australia it's 26, but at that time it was only 12 weeks. So the childcare was really critical. With the cancer, UOW was magnificent. Paddo in particular was magnificent. John Patterson was really supportive. So I was still publishing and so on. I was resting, but I was still employed and stuff. And with this, I was still doing stuff even when I was in hospital actually. Anyhow, so that's the first thing, but that's not a good thing. I'm not advocating that as a good thing. I just want to emphasize that. In terms of making the choices, I always chose the route where I thought I could have the biggest impact and the most fun. Except that, like I say, the hardest choice in my life, without doubt, was the move to Sydney. Because that meant sort of the family having to pay some of that price. And we've always made these decisions as a family. So I remember when I was thinking of going to Durham, I came and on the weekend trips to Wollongong, I was discussing this. At first, I discussed it with David before I even applied, of course. But then once I got the offer, I was discussing it with the kids. And Daniel at that time was 17. And he was sitting with me and I said, look, I've got this offer and it means going to the UK. What do you think? And he said, well, what's the position? And I said, well, it would be Dean. And he said, what, fully Dean? And I'm like, well, yeah, fully Dean. And he said, then of course you should go. So I'm blessed to have very supportive family in that sense. But the decisions, like I said, that was the hardest. Everything else was easy, really, by comparison. Thank you. Yudi's trying to ask something, but he's already asked me why I didn't have that. So.
I think Alfie also here has a question. I'm not.
Alfie, great talk, by the way.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Professor, thank you for that very nice sharing of your experiences. It's really inspiration for me, especially that I've mentioned earlier that I'm getting married. And one of the things that I wonder is, did you ever what are your thoughts about having kids before you had kids? Did you feel like it's gonna affect your career at that time? And looking back now and looking and remembering what your thoughts are, what advice would you give yourself?
Okay, so just to put this into context for you, my mother is the youngest of 10 children. I am roughly in the middle of 26 cousins on my mother's side. And whenever I went to Spain, when the family got together, I tell you, it was a party. So I was used to a big family. I always wanted a big family. David, on the other hand, is one of 3. And so our children have 3 cousins. And so, yeah, so it's a very different perspective. So I always wanted children. And then at some point, I began thinking about it, but it was thinking like, oh, at this point, we've not had children for so long, and we're getting to this point. And we were still quite young now, in retrospect. Should we have children? Should we not? And we decided we would anyway, even though it was obviously going to impact our careers and our flexibility. I don't regret it at all. I wouldn't have my children if I hadn't had them. And I don't, okay, there's also this general philosophy, and I think it goes to what John said about optimism. I don't have time for regrets. There is no point in regretting anything. You should think about mistakes for long enough to learn from them and then move on. That's it. You should learn from mistakes, no doubt. So you need to reflect on things that have happened and change what you can for the future, but you should never regret anything. So I definitely do not regret having children. I don't know that I would be here if I hadn't had my children, because I don't, it's a complex system. These things are interconnected. So I am very happy with my life. Now, in terms of other people, that's entirely up to the individual, and it depends on many, many things. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that in Portugal, the majority of mathematicians are female, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor. It was really inspiring. Is it okay if I ask another question?
Of course it is.
Okay. Did you ever experience that something like, I think it was already mentioned in your presentation, but I'm not sure, that your gender played a role in something significant in your life professionally?
Absolutely. Yes. I could give you many examples. And the interesting thing is, for a lot of the time, I didn't notice it, but others pointed it out to me, which was really interesting. So I remember, so when I was going through the cancer treatment and I was going to go to chair the laureate panel, as a head of school, I had been provided with a mobile phone. And in January of whenever it was, 2014, I guess, I went to the dean and I said to him, is it possible that I could keep my mobile phone even though I'm no longer a head of school, because I'm going to chair the laureate panel this year and there's going to be lots of calls out of hours and so I need to be, is it okay if I keep the phone? And he looked at me with this look of confusion on his face. And he said, chairing the laureate panel, that's very prestigious. And he said it in that tone of voice, right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, no shit, Sherlock. What are you saying? So then I went back to the office and I was talking with Aidan and Adam. And I said, he said this. And they said, oh, yeah, but you know, that's because you haven't got the right appendage. I'm like, what? Because you haven't got penis. And I'm like, good Lord, guys, what are you saying? Anyhow, and I'm pretty sure that that guy was definitely coming from that place. He just could not conceive of the fact that I might be chairing the laureate panel. It's just inconceivable to me. Mind you, this is also the same guy who turned to Aidan at one point and said, in engineering, we have this wonderful thing called a correlation. Tell me, do you have that in mathematics? Because it's really useful. So, you know, sometimes you have to take into account that people are just idiots. I say.
Your correlation.
I'm sorry, does that help, Alfie?
Definitely. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. No more questions from me.
Further questions? Yes.
It seems that mathematicians in university management are also minority. Is that so? Do you have some suggestion for the people around here to change this?
Well, I'm not sure that's true.
I don't know.
Actually. Barney Glover, for example, was a mathematician. So he was the ex-VC here. There are various. So sometimes one of the things about being in senior management, in particular, the minute you get past head of school, people don't know what your discipline is necessarily. So it's not obvious which one's a mathematician. So it's not clear to me that mathematicians are underrepresented in management. I can tell you that mathematicians are overrepresented as high school principals. So there are a disproportionate number of mathematicians as high school principals, in my experience, and that's anecdotal. So I should check that out. But I've met a lot of high school principals who are mathematicians, which is interesting. In terms of advice to people here, like, not everybody has to go into management, right? People should do whatever they want to do. I would say don't be scared of it, but do make sure that you make sure you quarantine some time for research, because personally speaking, my feeling is that one has to lead by example and with credibility. So in fact, I've only stopped teaching after I had this incident. When I was in Durham, I developed and taught the Maths for Data Science subject that was part of the Master of Data Science, which I developed. So I was still doing educational stuff. I was still doing research, not as much as I would be if I weren't in management, but enough so that people understood that I understood what their problems were, if and nothing else. So, so yeah, it's a choice. If I don't know quite what advice to give. I don't know. Do you two have, Kurt and John, any advice?
You know, if you negotiate, you know, as they usually say, 20% of your time is for research, but don't believe it.
No, okay. So here's the other thing. People say, oh, I don't have the time. I can't find the time. You don't find time.
Yeah.
Time isn't sitting there in a corner waiting for you to find it. You have to make time. So in fact, one of the situations I had at one point was one colleague who had been moved to a teaching focused position because they hadn't been doing enough research according to various benchmarks that were being used in an arbitrary fashion, I think. And so I met with him, and he's a man, and I said, what happened? And he said, well, you know, my partner works in finance, and so is up at 7:30 to get into work, you know, is in work by 7:30. And so I used to come in, and that's when I used to do my research in the mornings, and then we had kids, and she still had to be in at 7:30, and I had to do the drop off. So he became the primary carer. So this is a typical story of women, actually, not of a man. And so that had eroded his time. And I said, did you try working at evenings when they've gone to bed? He said, no, I'm a morning person, so it doesn't really work for me. And he had a really big administrative job within the school, and he was doing it very conscientiously. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to allocate 9 to 11 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or whatever days you want, to just do research. And you're going to come in at 9 when you drop the kids off at school, and you're going to shut your door. There's going to be a note on your door that says, do not knock unless it's absolutely urgent. Everybody in the office downstairs is going to know that they're not to call you, they're not to knock on your door unless it's absolutely essential. You're not to open your emails. You're just supposed to come in, do 2 solid hours of work on those 2 days, and then the rest of the week, guilt-free, do whatever you like, do all your jobs and whatever. And within 2 years, he had a paper in the Annals of Statistics. So it works, right? But you have to make that time. You can't expect to find it. And I think one of the, okay, so here's a challenge in going from being an academic to management, is that academics tend to work according to a timetable, whereas in management, you have to work to a diary. So in other words, the difference being a timetable is the same from one week to the next. You have the class here, a class there, and you just fit other things in around it. And so you can't expect to fit other things in around it in the diary when you're in management. You have to diarize time. So, for example, when I was in Sydney, I still had a PhD student who was based in Wollongong, and he was teaching in Sydney. And so we'd meet on a Friday afternoon for our supervision, and I'd drive him back to Wollongong on the Friday night. And that was blocked in the diary. And so, yeah, that helps. Being organized that way helps. Anyhow, yes.
Jackie, I can see that you always follow energy. Is there any secret to keep yourself energetic?
No. I don't know. Okay, so I am incapable of slowing down. I once had a doctor who said to me, you've got laryngitis. If you don't stop talking, you're going to lose your voice. And I said, when I lose my voice, I'll stop talking. Because that's the only way it's going to happen. Right? And so really, I can't help myself. I can't do anything really by halves. I have, you know, these student evaluation subject questionnaires or whatever. I used to get really high scores on enthusiasm, really high scores, to the extent that students would say, she's eccentric. But I also used to get really low scores on lectures at the right speed for note-taking. This was in the days when you used to have to note-take. And later I found out that in a 3rd year class, when I was pregnant, Aidan and 2 others used to play tag on taking notes when I was writing on the board, because their hands would get tired. And so they'd share the notes afterwards and put them together into leave them. So yeah, lecturing at the right speed for note-taking was a problem. So I decided to try and slow down my lecturing so that people could take notes. And the minute I did that, my scores on lectures at the right speed for note-taking went up, but my score on enthusiasm went down, because people were confounding speed with enthusiasm. But whenever people say, you're so enthusiastic, how do you do it? And I'm like, if I can't be enthusiastic about it, how can I expect you to be? Well, this is beautiful stuff. This is amazing stuff. Of course you should be enthusiastic. Anyhow, I'm happy to keep going, but I'm sort of aware of the time.
We haven't hit 5 o'clock yet.
Okay, sorry. But you know, there may be other questions for Asilata or for others, you know, as well. But I'm also happy to answer more questions. Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
You put a bunch of things down as the head of school at ELW.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you've done? How did you achieve all those things?
Actually, I think I achieved more at Sydney. And if you don't mind, I'll tell you how I did it at Sydney. Because one of the things I did at Sydney was increase the number of women in the department. So remember, Nalini was the first professor of mathematics and I was the second. By the time I left, there were 5 professors of mathematics. When I arrived at Sydney, there were 5 women in ongoing positions. By the time I left, there were 17. Bear in mind, this is a department of 60 odd people or something. And sure, we grew, but one of the things we did was when we advertised positions, I would send an email out to the school saying, we're advertising a position. Just a reminder, according to the AMSI data, 29% of the mathematicians in Australia are women. So if we don't have 29% of our applicants being women, that means we're not appropriately sampling the space. Mathematicians understand that language, right? And so then 2 weeks before the deadline for applications, I would get HR to give me a dump of the names of all the applicants. And I would have said to people, please, anybody you want to be a colleague, please knock on their door or ask them to join us, even if they've already got jobs, right? Just go and ask them. And so 2 weeks before the close of applications, I'd get a dump. And I would send another email around the school saying something like, you know, only 17% of our applicants are women. Come on, folks, you know, keep going, keep knocking on doors. And if you have any people, whether they be women or men, that you are, or any other gender for that matter, that you want to, if there are people you think would be good colleagues and you have asked them and you think a conversation with me would help, please let me know, because I'm more than happy to talk to them personally. And so that way we just ended up, and so the key was getting them to apply. Once they applied, the whole process ran as normal and we ended up appointing many more women. So there's a couple of things, and sometimes let me be blunt, because when am I not? Sometimes the problem is not the obstructions for talented women. It's the lack of obstructions for mediocre men, right? It's the fact that many of the talented women are not applying, and so more of the men are getting in. So the London School of Economics actually put up quotas for women. And being the London School of Economics, they actually analysed the data afterwards, because people were worried that by having quotas, they were going to lower the bar. And what they found when they did that analysis was that it didn't lower the bar, because in fact, the great men were still being appointed, the great women were being appointed.
Why did they give the quotas in the first place?
Because we have unconscious bias, because we have, yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? It doesn't work on logic, Volker. This is exactly the point. And this has been replicated time and time again. So there's been whole sociological studies done where they've sent people CVs, 2 identical CVs, one with a man's name, one with a woman's name, and the man will get offered the position, even by women. This is the interesting thing. And so it's really entrenched, and it's hard to describe. Like I say, I didn't implement quotas at Sydney. Melbourne did. Melbourne advertised for women-only positions. And here's another thing. So when they did that, I was contacted as head of school at Sydney through the media office by a media outlet that wanted a comment. And so I quickly contacted Jan de Geer, I think, what was it, Alex? No, it was Alex at the time who was head. And I said, look, tell me what's going on, because I need to know what I'm planning to say here. And so I agreed to write some commentary, and they wanted 800 words. And I got this call at, I don't know, 10 a.m. in the morning, and they wanted 800 words by the following morning. So in my meetings, I was writing, and I wrote 400 words. And the first sentence was something like, of the professors in mathematics at Melbourne, of the 23 professors in mathematics at Melbourne, 19 are men, and all 23 are worried about this. And I said, there are many ways of addressing this situation, and this is a perfectly valid way to do this. I have every confidence that my colleagues at Melbourne will be able to appoint excellent women into these positions. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think we should just be supporting anybody who's trying to do something about the situation. And so I sent the 400 words to the media unit. I said, send it to these people who are asking, and because I'm not going to spend all night writing the other 400 words if they're not going to want it. And I got the response, thank you very much, but we were looking for a firmer opinion. And I'm like, okay. So they solicited a comment. When they got it, they didn't like it, so they declined to publish it. This is essentially what happened, literally what happened. So now we go to the first WMSIC conference in UniSA, in fact, and we're on a panel for women, and it's Cheryl and me are on either side of the table. And I tell this story because somebody in the audience, I think it was Shushi actually, said, what do you think about these positions targeted for women only? Do you think that that would be counterproductive because so many people object to them? And I said, well, just be careful what you think people think, because what people think is being curated by the media. This is not what people think necessarily. They're actually choosing which things to publish. And at the other end of the table, when I finished the story, Cheryl said, that happened to me too. They contacted me in Western Australia, different group, different media group, but exactly the same story. They solicited a comment. When they didn't like the response, they declined to publish it. So you have to be, it's all such a complicated mess. But the thing about management, which really is impactful, is that you can work within the system and do things in a way which is helpful. I don't think quotas personally are particularly helpful, because I think they raise these other questions which are actually completely irrelevant. And you spend all your time addressing these irrelevant questions, whereas you can do things in a way which don't involve having to address those questions and which just improve the situation. And then, of course, we got into a situation where people were applying to Sydney and they were saying explicitly, women in particular were saying, I applied because I saw you had a lot of women. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's weird.
We're getting close to being.
Sean's got a question now.
Yeah, we were actually having that discussion at lunchtime today, that if you've got a very low number of women or any minority, then you don't have the role models that encourage other people to apply.
Yeah, yes, maybe that's, so when I go to schools and talk to high school kids, usually I'm advertised as being a mathematician and I'm a woman, but I always make a point of telling them that my first language is not English and I was the first in my family to go to university, because those are the two things that are not obvious and that people then make assumptions about. And so I want to make it clear. So I make that role modeling visible. But I'm not so sure it is that much about role modeling. I think it's more about actually removing those obstacles. I think people are willing to apply. Women apply. They just sometimes don't get the jobs, even though, these experiments seem to support that. They don't get the jobs even when they're highly qualified. So I think it's a problem we've got to face head on.
I can ask a follow-up question since we've got.
Of course.
Last year we did have a few jobs openings, and then what I found was in general, the men were selling themselves a lot more than the women. How do you deal with that situation? Because on paper, the men had a lot better experience and output, research output, or citation numbers, etc., etc., etc. How would you deal with that sort of situation?
So I think mentoring has a big role to play there, because I think getting people to write the right things, and I think it affects different individuals differently, but generally speaking, men are more likely to apply for a position when they're not fully ready for it, and women are likely to wait until they're fully qualified for that position and overqualified. In fact, what's his name? I'm trying to remember. He used to be CEO of WEHI, the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute, Doug Hilton. He came to Wollongong and spoke to 500 school kids. He actually came, it was amazing. And one of the things he said was he gave a talk, which was brilliant. And then at the end of it, he asked for questions. And then he got a question, and then he got a second question. And he said, and they were both from men and boys. And he said, okay, I'm not leaving this auditorium until I get a question from a woman. So I'm just saying, start asking me questions, women. And so he got questions from them. He said, now I want to say another thing. Said, overwhelmingly, when people come looking for promotion, generally speaking, I'm having to tell the men, hold back. Generally speaking, I'm having to go and knock on the doors of the women and tell them to apply. And certainly I've done that all the time as head of school, to say, you should be applying for promotion, or you should be applying for this job, or whatever, which is one of the reasons why when the headhunters do call, I actually give them a list of names, because I make sure that I give them the women who wouldn't necessarily put themselves forward. So again, it's, I think we need to do our selection carefully. Okay, so I have another story, which is at one point we were interviewing, and this was a panel of very senior members of staff, including a representative from academic board who had been on many, many hiring panels. And there was somebody on Zoom who was from overseas and was bemoaning the fact that his university was taking in lots of international students, and that this was really, really bad because they were really demanding. And then he put on a face and he put on a voice and he said, a student sat with me and he said, you do this for me. Like, and I'm like, whoa, does this guy realize what he's doing right now? And at the end, when we were having the discussion and we went around the table, my colleagues were all saying, well, his research is really, really good. His research is really, really good. And bless him, the last person who spoke said his research is really, really good, but he doesn't seem like a very nice person. But I don't think there's anything we can do about that. And I'm like, actually, there is. Because one of our selection criteria, essential selection criteria, is teamwork, the ability to work in a team. And I think that this person cannot work effectively in a team that has been randomly selected from our school, because we are so diverse. And I don't think this person would be able to deal with it. And frankly, I turned to HR, who was next to me. I said, that's okay, isn't it? And she said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And there was this sigh of relief from the table. They were all really senior people who had never realized that they could use obnoxiousness as a selection criteria, racism as a selection criteria, right? And I'm not saying you have to be really careful, because it's a fine line, right? You don't want to appoint people who are just like you. You don't want to not appoint people you don't like in some sense, right? But you do want to have a functional department, and there are enough nice people out there that you can afford to appoint nice people who are good people who are nice. You do not have to appoint good people who are bad. Another example, when we appointed Noel Cressy at Wollongong, Noel was a very esteemed statistician, world-renowned, and he came to visit Wollongong, and he was negotiating directly with the DVC Research for his particular contract. And I went to see him, I met with him, and I said, okay, I'd love to have you, you're great, but here's the thing. The stability of the department is of the utmost importance too. And sometimes in some places there's a disharmony between mathematicians and statisticians. This is a very harmonious union, and we want to keep it that way. So if I feel at any point that you will destabilize that, I will not support your appointment. And he looked at me and he said, that's fine. And, you know, similarly with Geordie, one of the nicest people you could care to meet. And so there are enough good, nice people out there that you don't have to appoint people who aren't nice. So I think that's also something to bear in mind. But merit is myth. Be careful. Sorry.
I think we could keep on going forever. And I haven't even had a chance to ask most of my questions, because we've had everybody asking so many good questions. So I want to thank our speakers for today, Alfie, Aslata, and Jackie. So thank you very much for talking.
These and
Okay, so for our, so we have a bag for, okay. So we have a few little goodies in here with maybe maths or maybe Western Sydney on here for our speakers. So Asalata, thank you very much. And look, it says maths at Western Sydney. Wonderful.